I welcome Dr. Ashish Naik to our webinar. Now I request Dr. Ashish Naik to continue his discussion on media literacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Padi. And also, I'm really thankful to Professor Sunil Behra, who is working as Professor of Eminence in the Department of Mass Communication and Journalism, Tezpur University, for organizing such a webinar series and giving us an opportunity to actually participate and express our views on different subjects. So today I'll be going to talk about media literacy. And as we all know, media literacy is a very vast and very complex subject. And what we actually know about media literacy is only the tip of the iceberg. And if we try to really understand media literacy, then we have to read a lot, and which is actually lying under the tip or lying beneath the tip. So, so can I please share my screen? So as I was discussing, so what we understand about media literacy is only the tip of the iceberg, and what lies beneath that tip is the actual understanding. But for those people who are actually coming to know about media literacy or literacy for the first time, so they may not be knowing in detail about the theoretical perspectives and the areas which are actually connected with the term media literacy. But even sometimes it becomes very difficult for me to understand and actually recollect all the things which are actually directly or indirectly connected to media literacy. So I'll begin my presentation, and with an assumption that everyone knows something about media literacy or literacy. So I have designed my presentation like this. So understanding literacy, because then I will move on to defining media literacy and the areas which are connected with media literacy. Then I will talk about media literacy theories and approaches, and then I will move on to why is it essential to become a media literate, and then I will go on to discuss about how can we or one become a media literate. Then I will talk a little bit about media literacy and social dynamics. Then I will talk about policy and practical interventions which are actually needed at this hour, considering what is happening in the field of media, media revolution, media evolution, and its impact on our society, culture, and politics. So, so first, let us try to understand or reflect upon what is literacy. So we all know that literacy is the ability to read and write in language. That means a person who knows how to read and write in one language, that person we call as literate. And there are two types of literacy. One is functional literacy and the other one is critical literacy. And functional literacy is all about acquiring the skills to read and write in a language. That is called functional literacy. That means the literacy that is required to make us functional. And if we learn one language, then we become literate and we can communicate. So that is called functional literacy. And people who are functional literates or functionally literate, they are usually, it is seen that they are passive readers or writers, because when I talk about literacy, I also include both the concepts, reading and writing. So those people who are functionally literate, they are passive readers, or you can say passive writers of texts, and they do not always or often evaluate the text, because evaluation of text or what we read or what we speak is always necessary, because before we speak we evaluate, and before we once we listen or access information we evaluate, and once we listen to somebody we evaluate. So people who are functionally literate, they are passive readers and passive writers of texts, and they often do not evaluate the texts, and there is another concept which is also connected to literacy, that is called critical literacy. So people who are critically literate or critical literate, so they are active readers of texts, because whenever we talk about literacy, we talk about texts. And so I do not restrict. So at this, so in this connection, I do not actually restrict text to a literal understanding. Anything can be a text. But if you talk about literacy, not media literacy, then text means written text or written text. So those people who are critically literate, they engage themselves in a conscious reading of texts. They read the text, or they listen to people consciously. And those people who are not critically literate, they do not listen to people critically, rather they listen to people passively. They do not actively participate in the process of communication. So again, critical literate person, or to become critically literate, is to become aware about one's realities, locations, point of views, and identities. Because why I talk about these realities? Because without knowing our realities, sometimes we fail to understand the meaning of the text that is actually supplied to us. And sometimes without knowing the realities means social realities, political realities, cultural realities. So without knowing these realities, or without becoming aware of such realities, we may fail to understand how texts are generated. So that's why a critical literate person is always aware about his or her realities, social realities, political realities, and cultural realities. And there is also, we can say, they are locations. They are locations because realities are locations, because, and also point of views, because our point of views, the point from where we try to understand a particular text is always determined by the locations. The locations means where we stand, where we belong to. So that location is always constructed by several factors starting from our education, our exposure to media, our ability to think, reflect. And also, I also equate these realities, locations, and point of views to identities. That is how we construct our identities, because identities are also constructed by our social realities and the place where we live and how we actually raise ourselves. And a critical literate person always, what he or she tries to do is to read the text from its context. That means, that is what a critical literate person does. That means he or she never forgets the context in which the text is actually generated, or a text is being represented to him or her. So these are the areas of critical literacy. So if one wants to become critically literate, then he or she needs to take into account all these factors. So next, I move on to media literacy, because there are so many scholars and so many theoreticians who have actually defined media literacy. Usually, more or less, one common definition that I found, or I find, is that media literacy is defined as the ability to access, analyze, and evaluate media messages and construct meaning out of it, because meaning construction is very significant in the process of literate practice. And there are three things which are connected to this definition. One is access. Access is acquiring the functional abilities and to gain access to media messages. Then analysis, reading the media messages and analyzing it from a surface level. From a surface level, what is visible? What is visible, that is what we read. Then the third thing which is connected to the definition is evaluate. That means evaluation of the media messages, which results in the construction of meaning that is very noticeable and obvious. That is why I told you. So we do analyze the text from a very surface level, because we are talking about media literacy. We are not talking about critical media literacy. So next is critical media literacy. There is a slight change in the definition. What is that change? Please notice that. So media literacy is defined as the ability to access, analyze, and critically evaluate. So media literacy is simple evaluation, and critical media literacy is critical evaluation of media messages and construction of meaning out of it. Here, access is different. Access is very selective. Since you are critically engaging yourself. So your ways of accessing information is very selective, and analysis is very careful and contextual. Analysis is always contextual, unlike media literacy, where we do not always engage in a contextual reading of the media text. And the third one, or third concept, is critical evaluation. So there it was in media literacy, it was evaluation. Here it is critical evaluation. So evaluation of the media messages, or critical evaluation of the media messages, resulting in the construction of meaning underlying the surface, which is not very obvious, which is not visible, but it lies underneath the structures of representation, maybe a language, maybe an image, maybe any kind of media text, maybe a cinematic text. So that is all about media literacy. The only difference is, in media literacy, we do not critically evaluate the text, but in case of critical media literacy, we engage in a critical evaluation of text and construct meaning accordingly. So then certainly there will be a variation in the process of meaning construction and the kind or type of meaning that we construct out of two different types of engagement. That is, media literacy, or critical engagement, and non-critical engagement. So next I will reflect upon some of the theories and approaches, because media literacy research is very vast and so many people are doing research. And I have also done my PhD in media literacy. And so I will just try to reflect upon some of the theoretical ideas and approaches using which you can actually understand and study media literacy or literacy. So to be very specific, there is no specific theory of media literacy. No specific theory, because media literacy as a concept, or literacy studies as a concept, it has borrowed theories from different disciplines, starting from philosophy to literature to linguistic studies, and also partly from cultural studies and from communication studies nowadays. So there is no specific theory of media literacy. It is interdisciplinary in nature. And media literacy is about knowing. So let me clear what media literacy is. Media literacy is about knowing or understanding media and how it functions and performs within a specific socio-cultural and political context. So if you want to become media literate, then we should develop awareness about the socio-cultural and political realities first. Otherwise, we may fail to understand how media is actually performing or functioning. But there are various approaches to the study of literacy or media literacy. One is philosophical approach. The second one is linguistic approach. Then cultural studies approach. Then communication studies approach. So the philosophical approach focus of philosophical approach is on interpretation, meaning making, and understanding the new and emerging phenomena in connection to the field of media and communication. So as a part of this philosophical approach, we can apply either phenomenology or hermeneutics. And apart from these two philosophical stands, there are also other philosophical ways of understanding media and literacy. But these are the primary, and this can also be applied. Phenomenology and hermeneutics. Phenomenology, understanding the media phenomenon, and hermeneutics means theories of interpretation. That means you interpret media messages and construct meaning, or that is what. And the other one is linguistic approach, and where the focus is more on linguistic structures used in the process of communication and their evolution as a result of media technology. That means this evolution in the linguistic structures as a result of media technology and media revolution. So the theories that we apply or techniques that we apply is, there are two techniques, there are several techniques, but two of the prominent techniques which are applied in media studies or analyzing media text are discourse analysis and semiotics. And the other approach is a cultural studies approach, where the focus is more on media and power relations. Focus is on media and power relations through cultural representations. So one of the important theories of cultural studies in analyzing media literacy and its impact is theory of representation by Stuart Hall. So, and the last is communication studies approach, where the focus is more on access to media and information, its effect on audience or readers. The theories are propaganda theory, agenda setting, framing, media dependency theory. There are many theories in communication studies, which primarily tries to understand the effect of communication and media on the audience and the society. So, however, the approach in communication studies, gradually it is becoming more and more interdisciplinary, where or as a result of which we are borrowing theories from different disciplines, starting from literature to cultural studies to philosophy to linguistic studies. So communication studies approach is more interdisciplinary in nature, or gradually it is becoming more interdisciplinary, where we are borrowing theories from all the disciplines. So these are the theoretical, theoretical approaches or theoretical, reflections and approaches using which you can actually understand and make a study on media literacy and its connection with different other aspects within our society. So, so next I will focus on why is it essential to become a media literate. Why? Because nowadays, I think many people are doing media literacy, and there is a lot of campaign promotions of media literacies are happening all across the world. Say children or illiterate and uneducated women. So there are programs to promote media literacy among them. So why is it essential to become a media literate, even for educated ones? I'm not talking about only uneducated children, they need only media literacy, but educated ones, they also, what do I feel? They also need to some extent a little bit of media literacy so that they can engage with media judiciously. So the first one is to question the media, because media may not be always unbiased, but at times it may be biased. So there is an assumption that media is always unbiased, objective. So that is a myth sometimes, because researchers have proved that media may not be always unbiased. At sometimes, at point of times, it may be biased. So we have to question media. So we have to question media so that we'll be able to understand whether media is biased or unbiased, or performing its duties and responsibilities judiciously or not. And next one is the possibilities of media diffusing propaganda, because there is another possibilities that media may, diffuse propaganda, fake news, which is happening now, and misinformation or disinformation. And it is always high, and it is even higher in the age of convergent media. This kind of phenomena. That means diffusion of propaganda, fake news, misinformation, disinformation is always high, and it is even higher in the age of convergent media and non-professionalization in the process of content creation, because there has been an entry of non-professional actors into the communicative space as a result of these as a result of this freedom and liberties that have been provided by new media revolutions, especially mobile phones, social media platforms. So a lot of non-professionalizations in the process of communication, content sharing is happening because of entry of non-professional actors into the communicative space. So that is why also we need media, or we need to become, essential. It is essential to become media literate so that we can actually, identify what is true and what is false, what is a propaganda, what is a news, what is a fake news, what is an actual news. So, and the next one is to understand the readings as they are constructed. Readings, because readings is very important, because readings are always constructed. The way we read is always constructed in the media text. That means it comes along with the text. The patterns of readings are always associated with the text. That means the patterns of readings are always associated by the creator of the text. That means the author. The author who writes the text, that author associates a pattern of reading with that text, and accordingly we read and construct meanings. So that meaning construction will become more authorial. So then it will be a kind of impositions. If the meaning construction, we are trying to construct meaning according to the direction of the author or the creator of the text, then there may be a possibilities of impositions of identities, impositions of identities, maybe in connection to racial identity, gender identities, and many sorts of identities, or maybe class identities, caste identities. It is happening nowadays in social media. It is quite observable. So anyone who wants to observe this kind of phenomenon, he or she can go to the social media and find out. To understand the readings as they are constructed by media and meanings which are imposed on us by media. That means meanings are also imposed unconsciously. That's why unconsciously meanings are imposed. Actually, it's not consciously that meanings are being imposed. That is why if media wants to dominate our perception, then what it will do, it will impose meanings. So that imposition of meanings, it will happen unconsciously. And the next one is decolonize our mind and our sense of imagination, which are often controlled by media frames, because we are constantly being supplied with information and media images. And media in this mediatized world is all, pervasive in the sense it is everywhere. And I think most of the time we are exposed to new and various types of information, and sometimes media also supplies information, images, and controls our sense of imagination. So if we want to decolonize our mind and our sense of imagination, then we have to consciously engage with media messages. Then the other one is liberate ourselves from the hegemonic orders of knowledge and epistemic violence. Because what I say, we have to liberate ourselves from the hegemonic orders of knowledge and epistemic violence. And what is the connection between epistemic violence and media? Because knowledge construction takes place through mediation and dialogue. And since media is playing a very important role in the process of information sharing and public debates and discussions, then we cannot ignore the role of media in the process of construction of knowledge. And we sometimes construct knowledge by taking references from information sources or sources of information. Since media is the only source of information or the most vital source of information, then if media is not actually doing its work judiciously, then there is every possibility that it will colonize our mind at the same time. So we'll be constructing knowledge based on the information and frames of references were supplied by the media houses or the media in general. So there is a kind of epistemic violence which is happening because of media dominance and media framing. Then the other one is access, participation, and empowerment. And access, participation, and empowerment, because it is also connected to partly development, social change, because for that reason also we need to become media literate, because we cannot have development without making people literate. And since we are living in a mediated society where media is playing a very crucial role in our life, so we have to make people media literate so that they can carefully access information and also actively participate, and also empower themselves. So in this context, I would like to discuss about conscientization or critical consciousness, the concept given by Paulo Freire. That means becoming conscious about one's own realities and or locations, which I've already discussed. And empowerment is not possible without becoming conscious about one's own realities. That means if we do not know our problems, if we do not know about our problems, we cannot actually change ourselves. So becoming conscious about one's reality is very important if one wants to develop himself or herself. It also applies to everybody in general. So that the other one is to protect ourselves from misinformation and propaganda. So these are the reasons why it is essential to become a media literate. So how can we become media literate then? So how do we do that? So there are things. So we have to understand media, as I was discussing. So what we need to understand about media? So the first thing is its structure. Three things. Structure, functions, and contents. Structure, ideological inclinations, because media, all the media houses, so for example, any kind of media, including a person who is actually giving a lecture or whatever. So, all the media houses, so ideological inclinations, every media houses, they have their own ideological inclinations. If you talk about in Indian media parlance, or even talk about in parlance of Indian media, then ideological inclinations to influence their content. And the other one is ownership pattern. So like, public ownership and private ownership. Public ownership, they will be giving information and supplying news, focusing on the the development of the people. But whereas a media house is owned by private private individual or private organization, their focus is different. Their focus is profit. Their orientation is profit orientation or profit oriented. And the people involved, these are the things which are associated with the the structural the structural the media structure, the structural dimensions of media. So ideological inclinations, ownership, maybe public, private, or independent. Nowadays independent media houses are also coming up, just like the Wire, the Wire. Then there are so many other media, independent media, media news web portals which are available all across. So they're independent and they are free from any kind of restrictions, control, government control, either government control or control as a result of financing or whatever. So people involved. The other one is people involved. That means people who work in that media houses. That also to some extent determines what kind of content is actually created and generated and supplied it to the readers for their consumption. And media policy and also media regulations. Media policy also plays a very significant role in determining the structure of media houses. At the same time, media regulations. And the next one is functions. So there are different functions which are being played by media. One is social responsibility function, and there is another function which is economic functions. When a media house is functioning according to the socially responsible way, then it is different than if the functions of media houses are functions, social responsibility functions and economic functions, norms of media functioning. Functions, social responsibility functions, that means there are different norms according to 4 theories of the place. If you go back to the normative theories, that means which talks about how media ought to actually perform. So accordingly, there are 4 theories given by Seibert and Peterson. The first one is authoritarian theory, where there is stricter control over the media by a few people, by a few individuals. And the other one is libertarian theory, which is opposite to authoritarian theory, where market controls the media operations. Then there is social responsibility theories. If media is functioning according to the social responsibility theory, then its approach will be different. Then there is another theory which is called Soviet communist theory, because their approach is to serve the people. The media will be controlled by the government, but their objective, their function is to serve the people, to raise the voice of the people or raise the voice of the voiceless. So functions are always determined these norms of media, these 4 theories of the place and the 4 norms. Apart from that, there are also 2 other norms: development media theory and democratic participant theory, which is given by Dennis McWell. But according to these normative theories, the functions of media also varies. So we can become media literate by analyzing all these areas. First one is structure, ideological inclinations, leftist or rightist, ownership, private ownership, public private ownership, or independent ownership. Then people involved, who is working. I must say in this context, people involved and how it affects the content of the media house. You must be knowing about Robin Jeffrey, who has written one book, Media in Modernity, where he talks about Indian media scenario, especially print media. And he says that in Indian media, issues of Dalits is actually neglected. And also he finds out the reason behind such a negligence. He says that there is a very less presence of Dalits in the Indian media. So that is why it is also reflected in the media content, where the issues and problems of the Dalits are less, given, or given coverage, less. So functions I have discussed. Then contents. The last one is contents. Three things. If you want to become media literate, we have to focus on three things. One is the structure of the media. The next one is functions. The other one is the contents. Or content means, whenever we talk about contents, patterns of readings. What kind of contents? Contents means patterns of reading. Contents, because the readings comes with the contents. And whether a content is really dialogical or not, it is always determined by the kind of reading which has been associated with the text. So contents. So patterns of readings: authorial, preferred, or dominant. There can be three kinds of readings which can be or may be associated with the text. The first one is authorial, or preferred, or dominant. And the next one is against the grain, resistant or oppositional readings. And the third one is negotiated reading. So the contents always comes or may come with different types of readings. It may be with, maybe it may come with, a dominant kind of reading which will enforce certain values and ideas, and accordingly dominate our perception. If it is pattern of reading is dominant. And the other one is oppositional reading. Oppositional reading is always it comes from the audience perspective, because this is connection to this is what I'm talking about is audience reception theory. But this kind of readings are also constructed. Dominant readings, negotiated reading, a text which gives the audience an opportunity to participate in the process of meaning construction. That kind of text only provides negotiated reading or dialogical reading, or you can say dialogical engagement. So we can understand that. So then there is another kind of reading which is oppositional. Oppositional reading, that means it will resist the text. So while reading the text, will go against the current, or against the current, or against the grain. So then another thing is skeptical reading of the media texts. So what is skeptical reading? A skeptical reading is questioning the media and the contents created and disseminated across various platforms, catering to popular taste and preferences. So we have to frequently and rigorously question the media by doing a skeptical reading or doubtful reading of media and the intentions of the media. So that is what is called skeptical reading. But there is a problem in doing skeptical reading. If you become too much skeptical about media performance, media text, then that will lead to unnecessary confusions and conflicts. It also happens in an individual level, because if you become so much skeptical about yourself, then it leads to a lot of conflict and confusions. But we have to maintain a balance. So and again, the last one is we not only have to be a responsible consumer of media, but also we have to become a very responsible responsible producer of media content. So media literate persons are not only responsible consumer of media text, but also they produce media or text in a responsible way. That means, suppose if you talk about in this online and social media age, so how can you be a responsible producer? Because everybody produces text now, because media has become very much accessible to each and everyone. That is why I was talking about non-professionalization. So non-professional actors who enter into communicative space, they do not engage themselves responsibly. But here, if you want to be a media literate, or if you are a media literate, you have to produce text. That means share, post, speak, whatever you do, whatever way you create text, you have to do it responsibly. So that is why I'm talking about, not only we have to be responsible consumer of media text, but also we have to become a responsible producer of media texts. And next, I will move on to media literacy and social dynamics, because literacy was not the way it is now, because earlier we used to call it, media. Earlier it is used to be called as literacy. Then we started calling it as a media literacy. Now we are calling it as new media literacy. Maybe we can call it convergent literacy. But literacy is changing, and along with the change in the literate practices, it is also influencing the society. So change in the literate practices and change in change and revolutions in the communication and media technologies actually influencing our society and changing the social dynamics. The first point I would like to reflect upon is literacy brings unity within a society. At the same time, it fragments or divides the society. Because if you talk about literacy, critical literacy, becoming conscious, that is what is literacy. From a critical point of view, becoming conscious about one's own identities, realities, locations, then what is going to happen? So there are two dimensions. Literacy brings unity. We can unite the society. At the same time, there will also be fragmentations and divisions, which is happening now. And if you want to understand how it has affected, or how literacy has affected the societies and dividing it, then we have to go back to one of the famous authors, Benedict Anderson's Imagined Communities, where he talks about, because of print literacy, how the entire European region was divided into different nations, and print literacy and nation states, capitalism, print literacy, nation states. So literacy gives us an opportunity to unite, imagine, collectivize. At the same time, just because you become conscious about our identities and multiplicities, then it also fragments and divides the society, or divides our society. So the other areas which are connected to media literacy and social dynamics, people become conscious of their own identities and assert their identities. Also connected to the past point, people become conscious of their own identities and assert their identities, leading to conflicts and violence. The kind of conflicts and violence we are witnessing now in today's society, which is media driven, and where everybody is participating, everybody is trying to communicate, everybody is an expert in everything. So it is also leading to a lot of communication conflicts and also real conflicts and violence, because violence and conflicts emerge from miscommunication and miscommunication. And the other point that I would like to reflect upon in connection to media literacy and social dynamics, sociocultural space is becoming more and more participatory and democratic, and sometimes undemocratic or autocratic, just because there is so much of freedom in this age of communicative space. So everybody is participating, including non-professionals, and their ways of engagement is quite non-professional. So that is also leading to, undemocratic kind of societies. Undemocratic societies, because cultural space, socio-cultural space, cultural production is sometimes undemocratic, and social space is becoming undemocratic. We say participatory, but sometimes if you try to closely observe, then you will find that it is becoming more or less undemocratic, where anybody can participate and speak, write, post whatever he or she wants to write, without evaluating what kind of repercussions it is going to have on the society. The other one is media literacy and social dynamics. The other point, media literacy and public sphere, because there is a very strong connection between the kind of media we have and the public sphere. Public sphere, as we all know, it is a place where public debates and discussions takes place, and media actually plays a very important, vital role in supplying information to the public for participating in the process of debates and discussions. So public sphere, because of a change in media literacy, media and also literacy, public sphere is also changing. So public sphere has become more and more inclusive. People say, many authors say that. So it's becoming more democratic, inclusive, participatory. But sometimes if you again closely observe that, you'll find that public sphere has become directionless. There is no sense of unity and no sense of direction. So there is chaos. Everywhere there is chaos. So the other thing I just want to reflect upon, in connection to media literacy and social dynamics, is symbolic production and culture wars. Culture wars are happening nowadays. See, clash of cultures are happening because of clash of symbols, class of science, because everybody has got an opportunity or got the ability to produce signs and symbols using new media technology, which is very creative. And the creative potentials of new media is actually quite high. So sometimes those people who are non-professional, untrained, what do? They misuse it, and they misuse it, and they produce symbols, signs, and so leading to class of cultures, class of science, class of civilizations sometimes. So the last point is knowledge diversities. Uh, People say there is knowledge diversity because everybody is producing, but there is a lack of coherence, because we are getting to know information, knowledge from different sources, unlike the way it was 10-15 years back. So knowledge diversity is happening, but there is a lack of coherence, lack of direction, just like there is a lack of direction in public sphere, because there is a connection between knowledge and public sphere. Because you participate in a public sphere according to the kind of knowledge that we have. Since knowledge, the source of knowledge is quite incoherent, then our engagement is also incoherent. At the same time, there is no sense of direction in the process of construction of knowledge. And so there are problems and there are also hopes. If you talk about literacy, revolution in media technologies, media evolution, people becoming critically literate, there are problems, there are also hopes. So what we need to do? So we need some policy and practical interventions. So what are those? So a few of the interventions that I have tried to I'm trying to discuss, that I have gathered from my limited experience of working in the field of academics since last 6 years. So the first one is introducing media and communication as a subject from the school level to the higher education, and partly it has been started in few cases, but we have to do it, or countries, states need to do that. And the second one is involving government and non-governmental organizations for creating media awareness or raising media awareness among the people or citizenry, and especially among the children and women, who are constituted with the most vulnerable section within the society. And the third one is strengthening media education by including more numbers and amount of reading materials and critical theory that may enable the readers to critically understand and evaluate media performance, which is happening slowly now, but we have to pass it up. Then change in the teaching learning methods, where learning has to be made more dialogical rather than mere transmission of facts and information. So we have to look into all these areas if you want to really raise the level of critical critical engagement with media, with text, with the socio-cultural phenomena, what is happening. So this is where I end. This is where I end, sir.
Many thanks to Dr. Ashish Naik. And he already highlighted a number of things on the media literacy. So now I request you to put some light on the discussion of the Dr. Ashish Naik. And after that, we will go for Q&A, sir.
Okay. It was a very good class, Ashish. I am so happy to attend your class. And it was heavily loaded with theories and approaches and your understanding. And also there is a lot of clarity, I will say. Though it was theoretical loaded, but you have made it so very well structured, and you have brought in clarity when you talked about literacy. You began with literacy, you talked about functional literacy, you talked about critical literacy, and the passive reader, the active readers and writers, and construction of meaning. You have gone through in a very structured manner. But when it came again to media literacy also, and media literacy, you have gone one step ahead now. What is being talked about, that is critical media literacy. Critical media literacy, and then you talked about the theories. And rightly you have said that yet we do not have much of the theories related to media literacy. Maybe literacy theories are there, but media literacy theories are yet to emerge. And lot of research needs to be done in this area. I'm happy that you are doing that, but your approach, you have talked about the phenomenology, you have talked about the hermeneutics, you have talked about the linguistics approaches, the discourse analysis, you have talked about the cultural studies approach where theory of representation, Stuart Hall, all these approaches, and communication studies approach, what we normally teach to our students in at mass comm level, postgraduate level communication, whether it's agenda setting or media dependency or all these theories. But more of what can be included is this philosophical approach and linguistic approach, though we teach them a bit nowadays, discourse analysis or semiotics, all these things we teach them, but the philosophical approach need to be a very important component of our curriculum in the coming days. And culture has also been added to a large, to an extent, but perhaps the teachers need to be trained to understand the cultural implications of this communication discipline and also the philosophical orientations of communications. That's very good. And then you, how to understand media, why it is essential to become a media literate. To understand media, you have talked about it very nicely. And why do one need to be a media literate? What is there wrong with the present media? You must start understanding media means you will have to question media. You will have to question the content. You will have to question their intent. You will have to question their policies. You will have to question the entry of non-professionals, as you have very rightly said. All these things, unless we understand media, unless we understand, have a critical understanding of the content of the media, we cannot question. So literacy begins with the element of the questioning approach. Every individual need to have a questioning approach. Now, I was very happy when you gave the policy and practical interventions. You talked about the introduction of communication and media studies at school level. To some extent, in some schools, so it is there. We have started at school level, higher education level. We have been having this. Then the involving government and NGOs. It is also ongoing process, but it all depends on our intentions. You know, how seriously we undertake these things, utilize these things. Then strengthening media education, which we have been talking for the last 30, 40 years. But we have failed to a large extent, but certainly you are improving a bit, but at a snail's pace. And then changing the teaching learning methods, the pedagogy. Pedagogy, I will say, it all depends on the teachers and their knowledge of using the ICT. The teacher has to consciously and very, they should be committed. There's lack of, lack of commitment amongst us that we just simply take teaching as a profession. We never think in terms of how much of knowledge dissemination, how much of knowledge creation can be done by students and with our interventions. We are facilitators. We cannot disseminate knowledge. We cannot help students to create knowledge. We cannot create knowledge creators. But we can be facilitators. So unless we have that dedication and commitment, we will not be able to do that. I am so happy with your presentation, with your seriousness. Yeah, I know you are always a serious scholar, but you've done a good job. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Nayak. Now we'll go for Q&A. So one question from Vinod Rao. Sir, whether social media usage is considered as a media literacy or not? If yes, what is the impact of social media usage on media literacy?
No, to address this question, thanks for the question. Obviously, any kind of skills which is acquired by whoever, anybody. So this is obviously one kind of literacy. That means, you know, engaging in communications using social media. But there are some ethical issues in it. Just like, you know, as I was mentioning, no. So social media actually it provides a lot of opportunities, but it comes with equal number of problems. Just like as I was mentioning in my presentation, no. Social media, new media revolution has given us opportunities, but also it is not free from problems. So but we have to look at the problems in the sense what kind of problems we are facing in the age of social media, and who is participating in the process of communication using social media, whether they are trained or not, and whether their engagement using social media platforms is ethical or not. So that has to be actually questioned. So that is what I have rightly pointed out, and also Sir Behra also pointed out that same thing, no, that entry of non-professional actors. Certainly, anybody who is being able to use social media, and that is media literacy. But what about the ethical dimensions? How to actually interact using social media? What to do, what not to do in social media? What to post, what not to post? These are the ethical, areas that has to be actually, has to be, looked after. Otherwise, anybody who is using social media or being able to use social media, you can say he or she is partly literate, but at the same time, if their engagement is unethical, then we cannot say they are fully literate, but they may be partially literate, they are not fully literate.
Ashish, can I add something?
Yes, sir, please.
Here about just those who use social media, they cannot be called media literate. They are only using. Now,
Functionally, they're functionally literate.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Media literate make them judicious users of social media.
Yeah.
If one is judicious enough to use social media,
Yes,
they are all the media platforms for content which is very relevant to the society, then perhaps then we can say social media, they are media literate. So media literacy is not limited to mainstream media. Media literacy is also applicable to social media. It's how a person uses, how a person misuses. It all depends. If I'm using social media for the common good, then that is, I'm a sensible person. I'm a media literate person. If I'm using it, abusing it, then I am not media literate. I have diabolical intentions. I have other intentions. So that is media literacy is also applicable to social media.
Yeah, it is applicable. It's applicable. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
The questions are in the screen. Please answer.
Yes, sir. The first question from Komal Chaudhary to everyone. The first question is on advertising literacy. Is advertising literacy a part of media literacy also? So no, yes. And is there any separate or different framework for ad literacy? How to analyze ad messages? So see, advertising literacy also falls under media literacy because advertising is a part and parcel of our media world, and also advertising is a mode of communication. So advertising literacy and understanding advertising, that also falls under the larger purview of media literacy. And there are different ways of analyzing advertising. You can take different approaches in analyzing. Either you can do a content analysis, narrative analysis, you can do discourse analysis, you can actually do an analysis of the language that is used in advertising, the kind of visuals that is used in advertising. So there are different ways of analyzing advertising, but certainly advertising literacy is also a part of media literacy, since advertising also communicates. So it is a medium of communication, and it is a medium of communicating one's own ideas, whatever. So advertising literacy is a part of media literacy. Then the second question, how is media education different from media literacy? Media literacy is for everybody. Media education may not be for everybody. So that is how it is different from, that is what is the difference. Media education, media literacy, but what my personal observation, even some extent or at times, people who are also media educated, they also need media, literacy. So media literacy is for everybody. Media education, people who would like to study more on media, then media education is for them. So otherwise media literacy is for everybody, because since we are constantly communicating, participating in different processes, social, cultural and political processes using media. So media literacy is for everybody, whereas media education is restricted to some, restricted to those who want to have a degree in media education, want to learn more about media education, maybe want to do research in media education on media. So that is what. Then from Anamika Kaur. So, sir, those are using the media for just entertainment, that is also considered as a media literate? Yes, media literate. They're also media literate, because entertainment is also quite, necessary for our well-being sometimes. I'm not saying always, but to some extent, some dose of entertainment is always healthy for our well-being and our mind. So that is also, there is always things, because we have to selectively choose what and how we want to entertain ourselves. So we have to be very selective about what kind of entertaining content we want to actually consume. So certainly, so this using entertainment, that is also considered, also fall under the larger understanding about media literacy and literate engagement. Then from Rajiv Pratap Singh to everyone, if we are going to conduct a research with the approach of cultural studies in context of news, then how can we analyze cultural news? We can do that by doing understanding the representation, the way cultures are represented, and whether any kind of cultural politics is being happening because of the ways of representation of different cultures in the media, whether some of the cultures are being excluded and some of the communities are being excluded, because if some of the communities' cultures are not represented, that means there is a politics behind excluding their cultures, and accordingly they are also marginalized. There are different ways. So it's a very large subject. I cannot tell you in a very small in a very small way, but I need to. So there are ways, because there are ways. It can be done. Maybe I can address you. Maybe I will give you my email ID and my phone number. If you want to discuss about it, then we can discuss about it further. Then next, what are the references of media literacy and cultural studies approach? So I have not put the references, but I can give a reference to Professor Padi. Then you can get the references. Otherwise, you can contact me over email. I will give you the references and study materials for learning and understanding more about media literacy. Then from Sakshi Burma, is media literacy should become part of our syllabus? Certainly, it has to be included in the syllabus of different universities, and it has also been included in many of the universities, but it has to be done en masse. So then from everyone, sir, my question is related to media content that is providing by cartoon channels to our children in our country. Should government make special guidelines regarding the content of the channel? I have never tried to actually look into this cartoon, because I do not watch cartoon. So that's why my knowledge on cartoon and how it is affecting children is very limited. Otherwise, I will try to reflect upon that maybe if I get an opportunity later. Sorry. Then, sir, whether social media usage is considered as a media literacy or not?
I have already mentioned that you skip it. You skip it. You skip the question number.
Yes, sir. Is it necessary to improve cross-disciplinary collaboration to develop coherent understanding of media environment? Yes, certainly, because we are living in the age of convergence, and this kind of convergence is not only happening in the field of media, but also in the field of academics, and that's why we're talking about interdisciplinary studies. So, and also, if you have listened to my presentation, I have also pointed out how communication studies is also becoming gradually and slowly interdisciplinary. Certainly, we can have an interdisciplinary approach in understanding communicative phenomena or communication phenomena, or media and its influence on societies. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ashish Naik. You had a very splendid discussion today.
Thank you, sir.
The session was very informative and useful to all of our participants, especially my feelings, it is very useful to the media students, the students to their continuing journalism education. It is very useful to them,
Yes, sir.
and we also expect the same support and cooperation from you, from your university, since you are in the FM University
My
in
pleasure.
our state. So we
Yes, sir.
expect a lot of academic
Yes, sir.
support and cooperation from you. Thank you very much for joining
Surely, sir.
us
My
in
pleasure,
today's
sir.
webinar,
Thank you, sir.
sparing your valuable time with us,
Yes, sir.
sharing your good ideas
Thank
to
you,
our
sir. Thank you, sir.
participants. So
Thank you,
personally,
sir.
I am very
Thank you,
thankful and
sir.
grateful to you, Dr. Naik.
Thank you,
So
sir.
friends, now we'll wrap up the first session over here, and we'll go to the second session today. So friends, now the second session. In second session, we have the speaker, Dr. Juna. Currently, she is the assistant professor in Department of Communication and Journalism, Jajpur University, Assam. So basically, Dr. Deka will speak on the ICT for development, information communication technology for the development. So now I request Dr. Junali Deka to continue her discussion.
Yes.
Welcome, Junali.
Yes, thank you, sir.
Have a nice
Thank you.
lecture.
Thank
All the
you.
best. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Please carry on, madam.
Yeah. So very good afternoon to everyone. At the very outset, I would like to thank the organizers, Professor Upendra Pati sir and his team for giving me this opportunity to speak on this occasion today. And I also like to thank Professor Sunil Kanto Behra sir, Professor of Eminence, Tejpur University, for having the confidence on me and giving me this opportunity. I also thank the participants who are there for their active listening for all these days. I hope I can contribute something into this entire the knowledge that has been generated so far for this 8-9 days. Today I'll be talking on the topic of on ICT for development. This topic it has got the approach on both development communication and also on communication for development. The disciplines that are these days we talk about communication for development more often rather than development communication. So ICT for development basically is one component of that. And in my presentation, I'll be dealing with the Sustainable Development Goals and the Millennium Development Goals, how these goals have been identified and these have been framed by a group of people or by a group of masterminds, and how these goals have been made compulsory for other parts of the world, especially for the developing country like India. We are trying to cope up with those goals. And in lieu of that, how ICT becomes an important part in that sustainable development goal. So that would be my presentation. I'll be sharing my screen. Yeah.
Yes.
So my topic for today's presentation is ICT for development, social cultural perspectives of e-learning society. So coming to the presentation, uh, the objective of this today's presentation is basically to discuss the conceptual understanding of paradigm shift in society in the context of ICT, and that too in new learning, e-learning environment, and especially in this COVID-19 crisis. The audience for today's presentation, the students, the postgraduate students, the research scholars or development practitioners and the faculty, they may be benefited from this talk. And regarding the learning outcomes, I believe that we'll be able to understand the notion of ICT for development, especially in the context of SDGs, that is Sustainable Development Goals. We'll be also able to critically analyze those theoretical concepts and understand their implications in society. And the third, it will give a scope for further research on ICT for development, though there have been a lot of research on ICT for development, but the literature review says that those research which have been done already, they are not enough to actually to develop a more advanced theoretical framework. So we can work on further research on ICT for development. For today's presentation, I have divided my topic into 3 segments. The section 1, I'll be dealing with understanding ICT and development. The section 2 will be the theories and the applications. And third segment is the socio-cultural perspectives related with the e-learning environment. So the section 1, basically, I want to revisit to the concept of convergence, which is, as we understand, convergence is more like combination of 2 or more technologies, or it's a combination of technologies, which brings out to be in a more, the end product is more beneficial, or it is more user-friendly. So when we say convergence of technology, it can be any technology you can name today. And the best example to understand the convergence of technology is the mobile phone that we are using. And that is the result of having different components, starting from the video component, audio component, then you have the message text component. So all these components have actually added up, and it has made a gadget or a device that can help in communication, that will help in passing of the information. And leading to this, the idea of convergence has led to the idea of ICT. So the understanding of ICT that we all have is information and communication technology. And the ICT, the term itself, has come from 2 different trajectories. That is, one is information technology, another is communication technology. And the combination of these 2 have led to ICT. So mobile phone is also a form of ICT that we use today. Then comes the concept of development. Development, this term is a contested and a most debated term. What is development for me may not be development for you. And what is development can be a positive, and it can also have a negative consequence. So many times it has been criticized and said that ICT cannot lead to development, or there are some researchers who believe that ICT can lead to development. So this sort of confusion and critical that understanding that we have in academia, or even in within the practitioners, that whether ICT can lead to development or not is a big question. But taking into consideration this COVID-19 crisis, we can assume, or we can feel, that there is a constant push to use ICT for e-learning. The presentation is mainly on e-learning, so I'll be dealing with that component. So ICT for development, this is basically an approach, or you can say that we use the tools of ICT for development. And there are different types of tools which are used for that. And the major component is, say, internet. So that is actually helping us for doing a lot of work. And this concept of ICT for development is, again, it's an idea which has been generated by some of the thinkers who are in the West. It's a model which is developed by the Western thinkers. And to actually transfer this technology from the West to the South, or from the North to the South, there have been certain goals which have been designed, and that has led to Mdgs and Sdgs. So Mdg stands for Millennium Development Goals, and SDG stands for Sustainable Development Goals. When we try to understand the word development, we basically try to make it into understanding of economic development, political development, cultural development, social development. And these are the areas which have been most researched and most worked on. But when we talk of technological development, that also become a part of this, entire development. And the social and the cultural development has been, most of the time it has been overlooked, because we are more interested in showing the development in numbers, or which is more measurable. We are not showing the development in terms of some, say, qualitative research. It is more of a quantitative one. So this is the area, social and the cultural, plays an important role in actually finding out whether there is development or not, whether this development is only within a closed group, or is in a closed community, or it's a development for the overall society. So that's why development it's considered to be a very contested term. Here, when we talk of development, we are actually talking of human development. And when we say human development, it can be on development related to poverty, development related to education, poverty related to employment, poverty related to food insecurity. All these developments are related. And when we say human development, the focus more is on sustainable development, whether these development models or these goals are going to be sustainable or not, whether it is only going to be, it will remain for a particular period, or it has something for the future or not. So there comes the role of sustainable development. And the role of ICTs, the way we use the ICT in development, that has actually, that has become ICT for development. How we use it, what are the tools that we use for development, and whether the ICTs can be used, or there can be ICT intervention in health, ICT intervention in education, in gender, like that. So that the role that ICTs play, that will determine whether ICT can be used for development or not. So as I said, the Millennium Development Goals, these goals were introduced in 2000, and these goals are actually for 15 years time period. So it ended in 2015, and the report says, and the survey says, that those goals which were being set, there are some 8 Millennium Development Goals, they fulfill certain criteria, but they were not enough. And that was the result why the other set of goals were introduced in the year 2015, and the completion date is on 2030. So these sustainable development goals, they are more in number. So there are 17 goals in total. And all these goals have been actually formulated and designed by the United Nations. And there are other member representatives of the different countries who have sat together, and they have discussed on these goals. And these goals, these days are these are the most talked about goals these days in terms of understanding development in developing countries. Moving to this idea of Millennium Development Goals and Sustainable Development Goals, the goal 8 of MDG, it talks about developing a global partnership for development. So there itself, within this goal, there is an idea of using ICT or technology for communication, for more transfer of ideas and information, transfer of knowledge, which was there in goal 8 in Millennium Development Goals. Moving to the Sustainable Development Goals, goal 4 is the goal that I want to stress here, because it ensures inclusive and equitable quality education. And somewhere they are also trying to say that ICT can be used for having this inclusive and equitable quality education. And especially when we talk of COVID-19 crisis, we all must have observed, and we must have practiced to use online teaching method. And that has become very crucial because we need to maintain this social distancing, and to maintain that, the only mode of communication is the online. And especially for this in the field of education, or in the field of learning pedagogy. So the goal 4 plays a very important role in understanding that quality education. So we are not going to stress on whether this education that we have provided in this recent time is, whether it's of quality or not, but the idea is that we provide quality education. If you see the goal 8, it also talks about decent work and economic growth, that can be employability, that can be job options and placement. That there also there is a scope for intervention of ICT. If we use ICT, then we can have a good growth of employability, and also it will give some economic boost also. The goal 17 of sustainable development goals, it talks about partnership to achieve the goal. So it again talks about partnership, the collaboration. That is the term that you must have heard in many discussions, collaboration. So the idea is to collaborate. So when we are collaborating, we're actually exchanging the ideas. And how we are collaborating with different sources. It can be through ICT, it can be through other technology or interfaces. The May 17, which is celebrated, or you can say it's been regarded as one of the World Telecommunication and Information Society Day. And this day, they actually made it a point that people should be using technology, people should be using ICT, so that this, problems of poverty, the problems of underdevelopment, all these issues can go off with the use of technology. So this was one of the idea that why May 17 was selected for observing this day as World Telecommunication and Information Society Day. Initially, these were two different dates, but later on in November 2006, it was merged and it is now considered as the World Telecommunication and Information Society Day. And interestingly, for this 2020 theme for this year, the theme is Connect 2030 ICTs for the Sustainable Development Goals. So they are also somewhere giving us the idea of using ICT for development. To fulfill those goals and to match up with that speed, even in India, you can see that we have some initiatives or projects like Digital India and Digital Literacy, where the idea is to promote digital communication. The idea is to go more for digital use or communication. And whether it is successful or not, that is yet to be finalized. But yes, we can see that there is a move for going into a digital society. We are more or less in a digital society these days. We all have some account, or we have a online payment account through which we are doing our transaction, even in a situation like COVID-19. And digital literacy is the area where the ICTs can play an important role, and it has been playing an important role in promoting these ideas of SDGs. Let us come to the criticism, because I have given you an overview of ICT and development and how these ideas have been actually projected with some of the goals like MDGs and SDGs. The major criticism, the first criticism is that it's a Western model. Yeah, we understand and we know that this model has been designed by the developed countries, and they feel that the developing countries will only get developed if they use this technology, or if they follow this pattern, or if they fulfill these goals. So if you fulfill this much of goals, then you are developed. If you are not, then you are not developed. So the criticism is that it's a Western model. So that model may not fit to our society, may not fit to our structure. So the criticism lies on that. The second point is that development for whom? When we are saying that ICT will lead to development, then who will get developed? Is it only a smaller section of society? Is it the entire society? Is it only a smaller community? Or is it going to be the entire world? So development for whom? Are we considering all the community people? Are we considering all these sections of the society? Are we considering the inclusivity? So that again remains a question mark, because you must have seen when we were talking of when we were doing this online teaching thing in this COVID situation, uh, the most of the learners, they didn't have, either they didn't have a computer or they didn't have a mobile phone, the network connectivity, all these issues are there, and we cannot deny that part. Yes, but at the same time, if we say that this online courses or the online mode of delivery has helped a section of society during this COVID-19, yes, that is also true, because I think that is where this webinar comes plays an important role, because webinar is going on an online mode. Somebody asked me that, are you in Bhubaneswar? Then I said, no, this is a webinar. So this entire concept of space and the technology has been criticized also, that whether this development is only for a certain section of society who can have access to technology or who can have access to information. The third criticism is on homogeneous approach, because all the goals, if you read and if you see those 17 goals or the 8 goals, they are very uniform in nature, that what has happened in Africa and what has happened in Assam or what has happened in India, the approach is going to be the same, but that cannot be same. So this homogeneous approach is a problem. It should be heterogeneous, because we cannot have a uniform level of understanding. We cannot have a uniform group of people in a society. We are diverse. So there lies a problem in that. And the fourth criticism is that whether we are talking about ICT for development or we are talking for development for ICTs, whether we are actually contributing for this technological giants like Google, Microsoft, or Facebook, or any such giant who are working on the technology. So are we contributing to them, or is it only for their profit-making business? So this is a big criticism in terms of ICT and development. Moving to the next section is the theories and the application. Here I have noted down some of the important theories or the models which are being aggressively used in terms of doing research in ICT. The first is the capability approach, and this approach, the Amartya Sen's approach, has been one of the important theories or the models whenever we talk of ICT. It talks about how poverty, for example, poverty can be a problem for someone, and because of poverty we cannot have access to some of the information. So capability approach in terms of ICT plays it goes hand to hand. So if I'm not capable, say economically, if I'm not capable to have a mobile phone or have a computer or to have a fast internet service, then my idea of that development would be totally different. The same thing with the affordances. If we go for the affordance model, then it again tries to hint on that affordances is used in the context of the possibility, in terms of only what technology can do. It's not only what technology can do, but it also what technology can and how technology can help. Is my internet not working?
No, it's fine. Go ahead.
Okay. So it basically gives an understanding on not what technology does, but how the users can use the technology, and what are the challenges and what are the problems that these users have. So that defines the concept of affordances while doing research in ICT. We also have this actor network theory, and actor network theory is not just about the way human interact or the relation with the technology and the development, but it also talks about the role of technology in the society and the power by which technology influences or influenced by the social elites. And this social network theory and social capital, more or less they go go hand in hand. Social capital theory also has been widely used to examine diverse ICT related initiatives. Social relationships are researched, whether we have that relationship with the technology or not, and also about the angle of development and the accumulation of human capital in terms of development and technology. And the last theory that is TAM is again very widely used. This is technology acceptance models. This is basically an information system theory that models users come to accept and use technology, and uses an acceptance of the user, uses an acceptance of the technology. And Davis Technologies was in 1989, which has actually talked about how technology has been accepted by the users and how they are using it. So you can see that all these theories have some similarity with each other, but their approaches are a little bit different. But yes, they are the say important theories which we can refer whenever we are dealing with doing any research on ICT. Then comes the another theoretical framework, that is the post-industrial society, which has been discussed by, or which has been talked about by Daniel Bell. And it's basically the society that we are living in today. It's a post-industrial society. This society is talking about the accumulation of wealth, is talking about accumulation of knowledge, and this is happening, or this can be possible with the use of technology. So Daniel Bell's idea of post-industrial society, though it was not accepted initially, but still most of the researchers or thinkers, they do refer to post-industrial society, where we are not talking about only the manufacturing of the services, but we are also talking about the manufacturing of the knowledge about this society that we call as knowledge society. And on the similar area, we also have a society that is network society, which was coined by Emmanuel Cassels, and he gave a very beautiful explanation of how our society is connected with different nodes or the networks, and our social, cultural, economic, and political behaviors, or the development is related with this network. So today, when we are sitting at our homes and we are using internet for collection of any information or for accessing any information, it is basically the theory of network society, where we all play, we are just like this a network. I am a network, you are a network, and like this we are actually some nodes who are working together for passing the information and also for the collection of information. So that is the idea of network society that Manuel Cassel has tried to work on. There are some theoretical frameworks which talks basically on interpersonal behavior. And why interpersonal behavior? Because when we are using technology, we are not only using technology as a device, because it has also some effect on our social behavior. And social behavior depends a lot on our interpersonal behavior. So the first theory that talks about this interpersonal behavior is the social cognitive theory, which was initially developed as a social learning theory by Albert Bandura. That was way back in 1996, but again this became social cognitive theory in the year 1995. So this theory basically assumes that individuals they interact constantly with their social environment, and that they influence and are influenced by the social milieu, like the friends, family, co-workers, and so forth. So if we consider this as a social space, so we as colleagues or academicians or students or researchers, we are interacting, and when we are interacting, it has somewhere lead to a different social environment. So when I'm talking on say using this Zoom as an interface, so this environment is different than the environment that I have in the society. So the interpersonal behavior that I'm having right now, or the kind of interaction that we will have in this space is different. So use of more and more of ICT will also lead to a different set of social behavior, because we are not trained or we are not groomed to be able to have a very perfect, social relationship. So we are trying to build that relationship, and we are also trying to understand the environmental, influences, like our thoughts. Maybe I'm more comfortable in a physical classroom than this virtual classroom. But in this setting, when my internet needs to be faster, my camera needs to be working, the people who are there, the participants who are there, they are there, but I can see only their names, but their videos are not there. So there is a different, behavioral pattern that develops within this system. So that is where social cognitive theory plays an important role in understanding the interpersonal behavior when we are doing an online session or we are doing an e-learning session. Yes, the practice, trial and error is the most powerful source of learning. Maybe at the first time, I could not use my camera, I could not use my microphone. Then maybe in the second time, I improved, or I worked on that. So there's a scope for trial and practice, and there is scope for error also in doing this, social interaction. So if we connect social cognitive theory with this use of ICT, or for an online session or a class, then we can do more research on this interpersonal behavior in a more of a qualitative manner. We can do that. Then comes the social network and the social support theory. This theory explains the mechanism by which social interactions can promote or inhibit individual and collective behavior. Here, it is not only an individual, say, in behavior, but it's also going to be collective behavior. And it was defined by Israel in 1985, Israel and Skurman 1990, and other researchers. A social network is person-centered and refer to the set of linkages and social relationship between people. So basically, it is a social network in terms of that I am one factor for networking. Then from me, the other people connect. So this is a network that builds up. So and this social network actually it develops an understanding of network theory that enables programmers to analyze in a better way how friends, families, and other significant people might impact on the same individuals and groups that are trying to influence. So these are basically, again, discussing the social structure and the way we interact, the way our behaviors are determined, and in terms of even interpersonal, behavior has been developed. The third is the social experience model, which it's again a human development perspective. There is Bloomberg et al. In 1994 and developed a framework for understanding the critical interaction between elements of the social environment and health. Yeah, this is another different component. They consider the concept of social experience and the ways in which immediate and wider environment of an individual can affect or his or her behavior. Yeah, if I'm not well, if I'm not feeling well, so my behavior would be different. The environment, if where I'm living, when I'm using the ICT, my behavior is going to be different. So social experience model plays a very important role while doing research on e-learning, because it will help to understand that how the learners are coping up with, or how the content producers are coping up with the situations, the challenges which are there when you are trying to do this interaction. And it also talks about the health parameter, because if I'm mentally depressed, then the interaction that I'm going to have with you will be very limited. So this is more or less an understanding of the behavior, interpersonal behavior, and the theories which you can use for understanding this social relationship. Then comes this theoretical framework, which is mainly for community and social behavior, that is diffusion of innovation. And this theory it was actually based on the collective human behavior and responsiveness. Everett Roger, 1986, he developed this theoretical model, and he said diffusion of innovation theory. And this theory is very interesting, and when we are talking of ICT and development, we cannot skip this theory because it's one of the foundation theory, we can say, that has led to this concept of transfer of knowledge or transfer of innovation and technology, the early adopters who adopts this technology and use it. So initially when online classes started, maybe we were not aware of how to do it and where to do it. But slowly and slowly we have adopted different technologies and different interfaces to interact and to talk. So there has been a transfer of technology from the main source to this, adopters and users. Now comes to the, let us move to the new e-learning environment, which is the area where we can do more research, taking into consideration the current crisis. And the discussion that I have made so far regarding that, how ICT and development is related, then the Mdgs and Sdgs, and also these theoretical frameworks, they all can be assessed or can be examined again when we understand this e-learning environment. When we say e-learning environment, basically we are also talking about online communication. So when we were talking of mass communication, our ideas and our thoughts were related with mass media. We also talked about traditional media. When online communication came, it was more or less very confined to computers, but that concept of having only computer mediated communication has now moved to technology mediated communication. We no longer say it is only computer mediated, because if I'm using a phone, then it is not a computer mediated communication, it may be a technology mediated communication. And then we also have online e-learning communication. So it is both on synchronous and asynchronous mode. Synchronous because when we are at the same time, same real time when we are sharing. So this mode that we are doing right now is the synchronous mode, and asynchronous would be not at the same real time. So maybe you are not listening this lecture live now, but maybe in the afternoon or in the evening you will be listening to this lecture, say on Facebook or YouTube. So that will become an asynchronous mode. So this is one of the learning, say, mode. And the fourth component is the user generated content. To do this, entire e-learning communication or e-learning initiatives, we need to understand UGC. It's not University Grants Commission, but it is the user generated content. And that basically is that we will be creating the content. So when I was preparing for this presentation or for this video, so I am the user and I have generated the content. And this content, because I have those technology to create the content, I have a software or I have some applications like PowerPoint presentation where I can make this presentation. So I have made it, and I can again post this, or I can send this content on YouTube on a social platform. So so this, four concepts that e-learning is basically, these days we understand more in terms of the online communication. We understand in terms of technology mediated communication. We can do both synchronous and asynchronous. If we are doing a live session, that becomes a synchronous. And if we are doing a flipped classroom concept, then it will become asynchronous. And user generated content, we all are producers. We have been told to produce content, and we are producing content for sharing more and more information when we are maintaining this, social distancing. With this e-learning environment or this e-learning society that we are living today, it has both challenges and opportunities. These are some of the opportunities, and at the same time it also have certain challenges. We have courses from SWAM, we have MOOC courses which were meant mainly for the students initially. Then we have online class, we have webinar, we have online meetings, we can have discussions, workshops, conferences, we have faculty development program. Gone are those days when a faculty need to go to some institute for doing the refresher course or for orientation course. These days they are online based. Then you also have online coaching or tutorials that are available for this e-learning society. And we also have an audio conference facility. You must have heard of this audio conferencing, where in Assam especially, a few days back, our chief minister, he interacted with most of the educators or teachers of colleges and universities through audio, through mobile phone or through audio conferencing. He was talking to different people, he was collecting the feedback from them. So these are the new concepts, you can say, or evolving concepts that have come up during this COVID-19. And it has again given a new structure to this e-learning society. There are challenges also. Challenges like when you say online class, we can have problems of network, we can have problems of not having the proper infrastructure. In terms of webinar, maybe again the same. So when we talk of digital connections or online classes, we have infrastructure is one of the important limitation. Then we also have problem with connectivity. We have problem with maybe psychological problems can also be there. Maybe a person may not be so confident or may not be so comfortable in doing an online class. A person may be more expressive offline, may not be so expressive online. So there are different challenges, but at the same time, if we see that during this COVID-19, when there are limitations, we could do this, classes, online classes, we could do webinar, and we can schedule the meetings, and we can do some courses also. We can do some courses from, say, from SWAM, or we can do some courses from other such providers who are offering those courses. So that itself is an opportunity to learn and to collect more and more information. At the same time, there are challenges to it. There are some popular online platforms there for e-learning, as you must be aware, like Google Meet, Google Classroom, then you have WebEx, Moodle, Zoom is the one which we are using, then you can also use WhatsApp, then YouTube, Facebook, Google Hangout. These are the popular online platforms, and they have become popular recently because everybody is trying to have an account on, say, either on Google Meet or WebEx, and then Moodle or Zoom. But it also has certain limitations. In all these online platforms, you cannot have, say, some have restriction on the numbers. When you are interacting, say, suppose on WhatsApp, you cannot interact with some, say, 200 people at one go, or maybe there is a problem in talking to each and every individual. Then at the same time, you have something like Google Meet, and you have WebEx, and they have the free version, and they have a professional version. The free version has some limited features, and the professional version has more features for which you need to pay. But yeah, these are the platforms which are very popular these days for e-learning. And we also have a user-generated creator, like these are the facilities which are there for creating this online content, especially for e-learning. You have Open Broadcaster software, Screencast-O-Matic, Cam Studio, or OneNote, Presentation Tube, FreeCam. Then you have blogs, PowerPoint presentation, Moodle. Bodhi3 is a learning management system. It's been actually designed by IIT Bombay. They are trying to do it on a larger scale, but they are doing it. So it's basically a learning management system like Moodle. And these are the different, you can say, softwares or the user-generated creator through which you can create. You can create the video, and you can create the audio, and you can post it on platforms like YouTube or Facebook. Now coming to the last segment of my presentation is the social cultural perspectives of this e-learning society. There are some determining factors that actually determines whether this e-learning society is actually the new e-learning society or not, or whether it has some limitations, or what are the challenges with that. The first is the communication process. When we say communication process, the way we understand communication, or we have learned the communication theories, we understand always in the sender, receiver, feedback, channel. This is how we understand this. But when we look into today's ICT as, or this e-learning as a communication process, we see that the medium plays a very important role here, or you can say the channel plays a very important role here. Suppose if I'm using Zoom is more user friendly compared to the WebEx. So Zoom, the medium is very important here. Then also the receivers and the senders. Now, all the receivers can become the senders, and all the senders can also become receivers. And we also have, there is a change in the feedback system. So initially, when we talked of mass communication and the feedback was always a problem because it was not immediate feedback. But when we take into consideration today's e-learning environment, the communication, the feedback is immediate. There can be psychological barriers, as I said, that somebody may be very introvert, somebody may be a camera shy person, or may not be so confident or comfortable in front of a camera or in any such device. So there can be some barriers. Psychological introvert, maybe my personal this attitude towards computer or towards any technology. Those can be some of the psychological barriers in terms of understanding e-learning society. So we cannot say that every learner here is happy or is comfortable in using the technology for e-learning. Then also the third component is very important, the physically challenged or the disabled group. Suppose when we are doing this online interaction, if somebody is not able to view the screen, or somebody is not able to listen to what I'm saying, that becomes a problem. So we need to think of those things also when we are talking of e-learning. The softwares and the applications or the apps, they are trying to meet to that end, but still there are some constraints are there. At the same time, we have certain social norms which plays an important determining factor, whether everybody is allowed or not, whether it is restricted to some community or whether it is restricted to a particular group of people. We need to think of social inclusion in terms of all this marginalized section of people. They should be benefited with this initiatives, technological initiatives or the e-learning initiatives. We need to think of them also. It should be a balanced one. It should not look like a biased one. And the environment also play an important role in deciding whether e-learning is successful or not. Because in this time, especially if I talk in terms of Assam, this is the time when it's raining everywhere and there is some flood situation in different parts of the state. So if a person is in that flood affected area and is trying to do this online class, then I don't think that that objective will be fulfilled, because the environment is not conducive for that learner. The cultural factors, yes, it depends a lot on different cultural factors. It can be my identity, it can be my gender, it can be my upbringing. So it matters a lot. And at the same time, we have some concerns about privacy and the security concern. There were some problems regarding to Zoom software because they had some security concern. Then later on, it came up with the improved version. So when we are dealing with online, our identity, our privacy, all this can be a problem in terms of security. And there are the incidents of hacking someone's account and taking out the important files. So these are there in a major challenge in terms of e-learning. Then we have infrastructure facility. It's a very pertinent problem that if we do not have a proper infrastructure, we cannot aim for, or we cannot claim that yes, the e-learning has been done, or e-learning is successful. And digital divide, yes, those who have the technology and those who do not have the technology, there is a difference. So we cannot have a uniform audience here. Availability of technology, if I have a high-speed internet and somebody has a low-speed internet, that matters. That actually matters. So the availability of technology is also one of the problem. Affordability factor, whether I can afford that or not. As I said, that some of the softwares which are there free and open source, but the free version have limited feature. But if you want to have the advanced or the premium feature, you need to pay money for that. So affordability can be one of the factor in designing or in courses for online e-learning. This is one of the news that you must have heard of recently. That's one of the Kerala girl who committed suicide because she missed some online classes. And this is one of the reflection of what is actually happening on the ground. It is not telling us about the successful story, but it is telling us the ground story, that how online class, this the e-learning environment has compelled someone to accept death. And this is actually the unfortunate part. And but we are in that society where we have to fulfill some of the say code and the conduct. We have to fulfill some of the criteria. So for that, so you can understand that this pressure is building up both on the learner and the content producer. So this is one of the darker side of of this e-learning society that we are living in. It's very unfortunate, actually. Coming to the critical theories, I would like to touch upon the critical theory that and the critical theory on public sphere, that is Habermas concept on public sphere. Here we can consider ICT or internet as the public sphere, where we are actually using technology for creating that space for discussion, for debate. And so for example, if we are using webinar, so this is actually a public space that we are using for discussion, for deliberation. So the discussion and deliberation. And public sphere is always is actually debatable, whether it is a public sphere or not, whether we are allowed or not, whether we are allowed to present our views or not. So that is the question. So I'll come to that also. And the concept of panopticon I have referred here as per Michael Foucault's concept, because if we see this Zoom as an interface, or if we take Google Classroom as an interface, then the teacher or the host is the one who is viewing and is keeping a check on who is doing what, and whether the assignments have been submitted or not, whether somebody has watched a video or not. So we are constantly doing this surveillance, and because of that, everything looks to be in order just to maintain that discipline. And the people who are there, the participants who are there, for example, in this case, they can also see the host and the host can see them. But in Michael Foucault's panopticon concept, the people who are there in that panopticon structure, especially in terms of the prison, they cannot see each other, but the main person can see from the top what is happening. So if we see the concept of panopticon in terms of today's e-learning environment, that can be related, and you can see a connection to that we are keeping a surveillance of, or there is a monitoring that has been done. So this critical theories, I'll again link up with the next slide. So many voices, one world, that is McBride Commission report that came up, and you can see the Zoom meeting ID that we all have and through which we get log into this session. So we are representing that one world, the academicians or the learners or the media educators, and we all have some voices, so we are into this platform. And a very brief content analysis of the screen, this Zoom screen that we are using. Here the software plays an important, we can study the software as a content, because the Zoom software is considered to be more user-friendly than the other software. So the software here plays an important role in having a better deliberation or talk in terms of e-learning. The meeting ID that we all have, this number 65, last digit 65, is our identity. And because of this identity, we all are here. We are present here in this webinar, in this talk. And we do not know our, unless and until someone writes who is from which university or from which department, we do not know. We have only some names, maybe a username, XYZ. And this is how we are represented in an e-learning environment. The host becomes the powerful, the one who is organizing the webinar session or the conference or any event. The host is the one who is doing that Michael Foucault's concept of panopticism, where he or she is monitoring what is happening in this entire interface. Participants, participants here in this Zoom software, you can see that the participants have their videos and the audios, they are mute and they are closed. They are listening, but they are not participating in that way. Though ICT or e-learning gives you an opportunity for doing participatory communication, but at the same time, here there is a control, there is a check that you are not supposed to unmute your microphone or the video because of the bandwidth issue or because of having a chaosness. So participant here is again a subject, they are the actors here. So we can again use the actor network theory here to understand that how these participants also play an important role in this session or in this interaction. Audio component, microphone is very important, because if microphone is not proper, your connectivity is not proper, the audio won't come properly and people won't be able to listen. So microphone is another actor in this situation. Camera, the video component, is another actor, because if my camera quality is not good, then the people who are watching, they won't be able to see that there will be distortion. Screen share is another actor. The moment I share my screen, people can see what is happening. So when I'm sharing the screen, I am there and I'm here also, and you are there and here. So there are no boundaries in here, no geographical boundaries. So we all are in that same platform where everybody is seeing these words or the text that are coming up in this space. So the idea of Habermas, public sphere. So this screen becomes a space here for discussion, for deliberation. The chat is another option, which is another actor. If I'm not being able to talk, if I'm not able to use my video, I can at least write and I can communicate. So the way I'm chatting or I'm writing something on the chat option is another way of communicating, is another way of feedback. So the communication process in this e-learning environment is changing. There is a constant interaction that is happening. And at the same time, you have some options like reaction and raise your hand. You want to raise a question, you want to ask something, you have those options that you raise your hand and you can ask that question. So that is another option that is there. It is also a content. If we have to understand all these features as different contents, and they all have a different purpose, and they actually help us to have a better interaction. And we also have an option called as recording. It helps that if somebody has missed this lecture or session, they can later on listen to this session or to this presentation. So to my understanding, this screen as a content gives us the understanding of all the theories that we have discussed, the way TAM has been discussed, how we can use the technology to interact, how we can have this, we can also have this social experience model, understanding the screen as a content. And we also can link up with Habermas' public sphere, We can also understand the actor network theory, and this is how we understand screen as a content in terms of e-learning. Finally, the conclusion. I have kept it as a discussion and conclusion because ICT for development, it has a multidimensional potential, whether it is for e-learning or whether it is for education or it's for health, it is for gender development. So it has a multi-dimensional potential that we have to accept, but we also need to see the ground reality issues, and that is where those determining factors play a role. And when we talk of SDGs and development in development countries, we need to see what are the problems that we have and whether those problems can be solved with these goals. Whether when we say equitable or quality education, whether who is going to define or who is going to judge that quality. And because the entire education system that we have is more or less is a Western model that we use. So whether that Western model is fit for our society or not. So that also is a question. Then like a pandemic crisis. So during this COVID-19, this entire e-learning concept has changed, has evolved in a very different form. And whether we are ready for such pandemic crisis in future or not, whether the sustainable goals like those 17 goals are enough to determine the parameters of development, or we'll have to think more on like this pandemic situation. This has happened. So the sustainable goal, which are going to finish in 2030, whether we can have a revision on those goals so that we can include this pandemic crisis, whether we were prepared to face this crisis or not. And the last part is about the future of e-learning society. The way we have evolved in learning and understanding, there have been so many conferences and workshops on introducing teachers and the learners about ICT. The e-learning society, whether it is only going to be technology based or whether it is going to be more human technology based. So that is one area where we can work on. And recently I saw there is an ICT Academy. You can log into that website also, where there are opportunities for colleges, especially in even for Assam. There are so many colleges that they are now doing this sort of workshops or seminars or webinars for promoting the idea of ICT. So, so the e-learning society that we are living, we are not only the knowledge providers, but we also the same at the same time knowledge consumers we are. So the future of e-learning society, whether it is going to be more and social and the cultural, and I would like to end my talk here. Thank you for listening to my talk.
Many thanks, Dr. Julani Naik, Deka, madam, many thanks. So, since our webinar advisor, Professor of Mdgs, Dr. Sunil Kant Behra is with us, I request Dr. Sunil Kant Behra to put some light on your discussion. After that, we'll go for Q&A, and then we'll wrap up this session. So now I request Dr. Behra to put some light on the discussion of Dr. Junali Deka.
Thank you, Professor Padi, and thank you, Junali. You have exceeded your time limit. You started at 12:05. It is 13:11. 1 hour, 6 minutes. And I don't know, the next speaker is your teacher. I don't know whether your teacher will be happy that you have taken away some of her time, or she will be angry. I don't know, but she must be happy that her student has become so efficient in content delivery. That was a brilliant presentation, I will say. And what is more important to me about your presentation is that you have talked about a lot of macro level theories. And very rightly, you have also talked about the micro level applications of those theories. And what is more important is that you have used the platform, the Zoom screen as your example, and how e-learning or online learning is happening in the days of pandemic. You have made it so lively. The contemporary, whatever we are on the platform, you have used it as an example. That speaks about a good teacher, to make it more contemporary, to relevant, and you have done that. Now, coming back to your delivery, your lecture, you have started your lecture with 3 sections: understanding ICT and development. Secondly, you talked about the theories and approaches. And third, sociocultural perspectives on e-learning environment. You have talked about convergence, ICT development, the different paradigm shift of development, and what is ICT for development. And you have talked about the MDGs and sustainable development goals. And the most relevant sections you have talked about, 4, 8, and 17, which are very relevant to a country like ours. And what I will also not mind to share is that you have talked about the India's initiatives of Digital India and digital literacy campaigns. Though very rightly you have said that we will not be talking much about its success, because time will only say about that. But what I am happy about your criticism, the major criticisms. First, this is a Western model development. Second, you talked about the development for whom. And third, it's a homogeneous model. This cannot be a universal model. There can never be a universal model which can be applicable to almost all the countries, whether across Asia, Africa, Europe. We need to reframe, we need to restructure, we need to re-strategize, we need to relook at all these things. Then only we will have to contextualize. And development for ICTs. You see, ICT for development and development for ICTs, the contradiction. Your lecture say the length and the breadth you saw. ICTs can be used for development, or are we talking of development for the ICTs as a development for the Microsoft or Sun, all these things? That's quite very nice. And the theories also, at 3 levels you have given us the theories. You talked about the approaches, capability approach, affordances, actor network theory. That was very clearly you have explained it to me. I was not very much aware about that. And the social capital, technology, time, of course, was there. And you have also talked about the interpersonal communication theoretical framework and communication and social behavior framework. Now, talked about Albert Bandura, you have talked about the social network and social support theory, and then the diffusion of innovation. Now, after that, the theoretical, the critical theories, where you have made the applications. The public sphere Habermas, the long, very old theory of Habermas public sphere, and the panopticon, Foucault's panopticon approach of the concept. And you have applied to all these things. You talked about many voices, one world, and given the example of Zoom, ID, how many voices, and we are converged into a platform. And very rightly, I am very happy that you have talked about, used the example of Zoom screen as the future of e-learning society and how we are using. You have also talked about the determining factors, how, whether it can be successful. But on a sad note, you have also showed us the reality of the suicide committed by a Kerala girl because of the unavailability of a television set. That is the real, you have shown us the mirror. But I am really happy that you have made a very nice presentation and you have made all of us more knowledgeable. So I am here in Tezpur. I will try to listen to you more often. Thank you very much, Junali. And I must welcome your teacher, my student, Aisha Tahira Rasid. And she is there. I am eager to listen to her. Thank you, Junali.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your kind words.
Thank you, Dr. Junali, for your participation and sharing your good thoughts. And your presentation was really very splendid and very useful and informative. We are getting feedback from all of our participants that your discussion is very informative and useful. So only one question we have, because since we are running shortage of time, only one question we can take. So this is the question we share on the screen. You kindly answer to this, and after that we will wrap up this session over here and we will go to the next session.
Okay. The first question is there an Eastern model to understand the use of ICT for development? Okay, this question is Eastern model means you're talking about the developing countries or the developing regions you are talking. So there is no such Eastern model. All these models that we are using are the Western based. But yes, we have come up with some of the models or say initiatives which are more locally based. You can talk about e-governance models which are there. Kerala has done extensive work on e-governance. Andhra Pradesh has done extensive work on e-governance. So, but as such, there is no such Eastern model or theory to understand ICT, use of ICT, because the ICT concept is still evolving in our country or in this developing world. We are actually learning it. We do not have a definite structure. Whatever we have, we are taking with from the help of the Western and the developed countries.
One thing, Junali, I will clarify. Junali,
Yes, sir.
here there is no Eastern model. You have said that is right. But if you look at the developmental concepts, and even if with the use of ICT, we have an Eastern theory, that is the theory of Sadharanikaran and Antyodaya.
Yeah.
All the theoretical models, whether for development or for any other purpose of communication, all are based on Sadharanikaran and Antyodaya. The rise of inner self and universalization of these theories. So Sadharanikaran and Antyodaya can be the Eastern model, I will not say, the concept, which has been the base for the Western models to come up.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you. Yes.
Okay.
So, yes, sir, many thanks to you. And also, I thank on behalf of you, your student, Dr. Junali Deka, for her nice presentation in the second session of our webinar. So, here we will wrap up this session. Please bear with me. I know the interest of our participants. They are raising the questions, but shortage of time, we are not able to take up all the questions over here. We will go for the next session. Already our panel speaker had already joined with us. On behalf of our team, Institute of Media Studies, I extend my heartfelt thanks to you, Dr. Junali Deka. We will also seek the same support and cooperation from your end in our future academic endeavor. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you, and sorry for taking the time. I hope Aisha ma'am will excuse me.
Okay. Good teachers always take more time.
Thank you, thank you.
Sure, sir.
So, friends, already the third session of our speaker, Dr. Ayesha Tehra Rashid, had already joined with us. Let me welcome her. And as you all know, Dr. Rashid is an assistant professor at the Department of Mass Communication, Assam Central University in Silchar. She has over 14 years of teaching and research experience, a gold medalist in mass communication and journalism from Tezpur University. Dr. Rashid did her PhD on identity, self-esteem, and social networking site, a study on Facebook users in 3 universities of Assam, and from Barampur University, Odisha, under the supervision of the Professor of Eminence, Dr. Sunil Kant Behraji. The core research centers on the intersections of the people, social practices, and technology interested in how meditated environments alter the structural conditions in which people operate and how people navigate and repurpose these environments for their own needs. Dr. Rashid is currently working as principal investigator on an ICSSR major research project that seeks to explore the promotion of health literacy using puppetry as social mobilization and behavior change intervention. With these words, I welcome Dr. Rashid to our third session of today's webinar. I am very thankful to her, and I request Dr. Rashid to continue her discussion.
Okay.
Welcome, Dr. Aisha Tahira Rashid.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you very much to the organizers for having me as part of this webinar series today. I feel, it is a big honor and privilege to be part of a, seminar series like this. And I'm especially grateful to my beloved professor and my PhD supervisor, Professor Sunil Kanta Behra, for thinking that I'm worthy of being part of this seminar. So, and I must also admit that I'm a tad worried and a little nervous also, to be talking on something related to research in front of the person who first introduced me to the subject. So, Behra sir was the one who first taught us research. So I hope I can do justice to whatever, topic I have chosen for today. And basically, sir, the kind of presentation that I'm planning to make today is on this thing, qualitative and mixed methods research. It is on qualitative and mixed methods research, especially in the area of social media research. Now, sir, I'd like to share the screen if I'm permitted. And I have a PPT.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
That's a great
Sir,
one.
yes, sir. Sir, actually, this is the topic I had
Where are you
prepared. Sir, I have a cough, sore throat, little. Yeah.
Take care.
Yes, sir. So this presentation that I have planned for today is on qualitative and mixed methods research in social media research. So basically, sir, this whole idea came to me because, I've been teaching research at my department for the last couple of years. And in my experience with the masters as well as the, PhD scholars, I've come to know there are some basic, misconceptions that people have about things like what exactly is quantitative research, what exactly is qualitative research, and maybe, some confusion regarding the concept of mixed methods as well. So, so that is why I had, decided to say something on this. It is a slightly conceptual paper, which I have, tried to elucidate with some, examples from social media. So, before we actually go to the whole intricacy of what is quantitative research, what is qualitative research, and for that matter, what exactly is mixed methods research, I think it is very, yes, sir. I think it is very pertinent on my part to begin my presentation with what we know as philosophical worldviews or research paradigms, because that is the, particular thing which actually guides or maybe, helps us in deciding which particular research approach to, opt for when we are trying to address a research problem. So, philosophical worldview, I use the term worldview instead of the more prominent terms like epistemology, ontology, or maybe, methodology, owing to the book that I read recently, by Professor John Creswell from the University of Nebraska at Lincoln. So he had written a very, seminal work called Research Design, and basically he's considered to be the father of mixed methods research, in which, he talks about the whole idea of worldview as meaning a basic set of beliefs that guide action. He calls worldview a general philosophical orientation about the world and the nature of research that a researcher brings to a study. So basically, there are other people like Lincoln, Linham, Guba, who have called them paradigms, like Crotty calls them epistemology and ontology. And basically, in common parlance, in research, we call them research methodologies. Now, the whole idea is that, the philosophical ideas that we have as a researcher, that is one of the deciding factors which lead us to decide on which particular research method or which research approach or which research design to go for. Now, research design, as we all know, are procedures that we use for collecting, analyzing, and interpreting and reporting data in research studies. Now, which particular method we will use, which research approach to opt for, and which particular method I will use in my study is actually influenced by what we call philosophical worldview, or that is the orientation, the philosophical orientation or the research paradigm that a researcher brings to a study. So according to Kaplan, the methodologies, there is a synergetic relationship. If you can, see this illustration that I have used, methodologies have a synergetic relationship with the methods and are differently based on the philosophical stance, according to what particular, philosophical stance I hold. So accordingly, I will be choosing any of these, research methods that are available to me. So now, coming to the idea or the whole notion of philosophical worldview or research paradigm, there are a large number of paradigms that have been proposed by researchers. But Candy, who's considered to be one of the main leaders in the field, he considers like all these paradigms can be grouped together under three main taxonomies. Something that he calls positivism or post-positivism, then constructivism and interpretivism, and the third is the critical theory. Now, there have been, other people like, Tasha Corey and Ted Lee, in recent times, in 2003, they introduced or they proposed a fourth paradigm in addition to the existing three, paradigms of research, that is positivism, constructivism, and critical theory. They suggested a fourth paradigm, which is known as pragmatism. Now, for the sake, I'm assuming that there are some students also belonging to maybe the PG level who might not be very well acquainted with these, whole notions of, the worldviews. So for their benefit, I just like to introduce them to these whole ideas very briefly. Now, post-positivism or positivism. This is an approach which is very deterministic or reductionist in nature, in the sense that, this whole idea came from the French philosopher Auguste, Comte, and maybe also from the work of, people like Stuart Mill. So basically, this is a concept or this is a paradigm wherein we feel that there is just one reality, and and that particular reality is something which is independent of the researcher and something that is measurable. Basically, meaning that there is a reality which needs to be observed, and that that particular reality can be measured in empirical terms. So basically, the research that is located within this paradigm, it relies on deductive logic. It relies on deductive logic and on things like formulation of hypotheses, testing of those hypotheses, and basically offering operational definitions and trying to make mathematical calculations, maybe even extrapolations and predictions, and in some way trying to establish some truth, what they call positivists call them truth, some truth in terms of numbers. So basically what we have in this positivist paradigm of research is we try to measure something using some kind of instrumentation, and we do that in order to most of the time test some existing objective theory that exists. So we look at something from the purview or through the lens of some existing objective theory, and then we measure some the components of that reality, components like as in the variables that are there to measure a particular construct, and then we use it in terms of we do some inferential statistics maybe to come up to some conclusion, to come up to some definitive conclusion regarding the particular theory that we have in our hand. Now, as opposed to positivism or constructivism, the interpretivism or constructivism, it comes from basically, it is influenced by the work of like people like very famous people like Jean Piaget. Then it borrows from the work of people like Mannheim, then Max Weber, and of late there have been people who have been extensively working on this area, people like Wilhelm Dilthey and Egon Guba. Now, this particular paradigm, as opposed to the positivist paradigm, it looks at reality as having multiple meanings. It does not see truth as just one whole, but it says that there are maybe multiple realities towards something. So in that sense, instead of generalizing something that is done by positivists, generalist, the positivist school of thought always believes that human beings are essentially similar to each other. So using some kind of measurement or using some kind of categories, they try to typecast people, or they try to generalize it for the entire population. I may be taking a small sample of people, subjecting them to some kind of observation. I'll be measuring the responses, and then if I'm doing positivist, if I'm using the positivist approach, then I will be measuring them, and then whatever findings I come up with, I will be generalizing it for the entire population. But in contrast, the constructivist or interpretivist paradigm, it looks at reality as having something which has historically and socially constructed, and that every individual is different. They look at individuals as different human beings who may be having different experiences, and as such, those human beings cannot be pigeonholed. They, in order to understand something, we have to have multiple perspectives towards something. So basically, the researcher doing some research using an interpretivist paradigm, they will try to get into the head of the participant, so to speak, and try to make meaning of what the participant experiences in a particular social situation. So this was the constructivist theory. So basically the basic core difference between positivism and constructivism is that if in positivism we are seeking numbers, in constructivism or interpretivism we are seeking stories. Now, the third paradigm, as we can see, is the transformative or critical theory. Now, as the term suggests, this is a paradigm which will look at research as some kind of tool for bringing about social change. So basically what this particular paradigm does is that it situates its research in social justice issues, and it seeks to address issues like political, social and economic issues which lead to problems like maybe class struggle, power structure, conflict, oppression. And then it tries to, through research, through some action oriented research, through some kind of intervention, they try to bring about some kind of change in society so as to end the politics that is there existing in a certain society, to whatever extent it may occur. So basically this, as the term suggests, critical theory. So this is a paradigm which thoroughly borrows from, or heavily borrows from, the work of the critical theorists like Theodor Adorno, Max Horkheimer, Herbert Marcuse, and Jürgen Habermas. And in recent times, there have been people like Donna Merton and then Camis and McTaggart, who've done extensive research in the participatory approach to research. And because it tries to bring about change, this paradigm is also known as the transformative paradigm. Now, the fourth paradigm, if you can see in the fourth quadrant, this was a paradigm which came into being around the late 70s and 80s, because there was this growing belief among the philosophers that it was not possible to access the truth about the real world by virtue of a single scientific method, as was proposed by the positivist paradigm, nor was it possible to come to know or understand the social reality as constructed by the interpretivist paradigm. So instead they thought that we should be looking for approaches to research that could be maybe more practical and pluralistic in approach, and that could maybe even allow a combination of different methods that in conjunction could shed light on the actual behavior of the participants. So this is actually where the mixed methods paradigm comes from. Now this is an illustration that I had designed in order to understand, in research we have different research paradigms. So whichever research paradigm you espouse, a researcher chooses a particular research approach, and accordingly within each research approach, which is quantitative, qualitative, action research, or mixed methods research, the researcher may choose, depending on what the topic of research is or what actually is the research problem, he or she may choose any of the research designs that are available to them. Now, since I'll be talking about mixed methods research particularly, before that, I feel it is very pertinent for us, especially the students who are present in this, gathering today, to understand the basic nuances or basic, basic, what do you call it? The basic ideas of what exactly is meant by quantitative research. Now, quantitative research, like we already discussed just now, is a paradigm which belongs to the, is a research approach which belongs to the positivist paradigm, meaning that, we try to measure something in empirical terms. So if you can look at this flow chart here, basically what happens in quantitative research is that we look at a research problem through the lens of some existing, already established objective theory. Now, when you look at something through the lens of some existing theory, what you do is you frame certain hypotheses or maybe even some research questions that, arise from the theory. Now, accordingly, you will, define some variables and then try to establish or operationalize those variables according to the theory that you are using as a framework. And accordingly, what you do is you try to measure those variables to look for some, observable outcome, or maybe, you try to measure it in basically empirical term. Now, this is known as a very deductive approach to looking at research. And basically what happens here is that you are measuring something in empirical terms, and whatever, in that sense, what you're trying to do is the hypothesis that you have using some inferential statistics maybe, or some predictions or some calculations, what you do is you're trying to establish either some, in case of a survey, you may be trying to establish some relationship between dependent and independent variables, and then also considering the factor that there may be some intervening or confounding factors in between or variables in between. But basically what you try to do in quantitative research is that you try to establish some relationship among variables so as to prove an existing theory, or also maybe to even sometimes to corroborate, or sometimes even to contradict the existing finding that you come across. So basically you do quantitative research to either test to test a theory, which means that you will either be corroborating what has already been found, meaning you will reinforce what has already been found through your own study, or maybe you will also be in a position to counter the findings of earlier researchers. Again, example of quantitative research, as we all know, we must all have done some kind of survey at one point of time or the other. We are all very well acquainted with the ideas of independent variable, dependent variables. So I'll not get into those things now. But experimental designs, like the trying to establish some causal effect relationship by making observations among experimental group and control group. These are all examples of quantitative research. So basically the core idea of quantitative research is that you seek numbers, and then you also seek to test an existing hypothesis or some kind of theory. Now, as opposed to quantitative research, we all have now discussed what exactly is qualitative research. Now, qualitative research, like I already mentioned, is something that belongs to the interpretivist or constructivist research paradigm. Now, qualitative research, according to Stake in 1995, he said that there are three basic major differences between quantitative and qualitative research. If quantitative research seeks to explain something, or explain a phenomenon, or explain a research problem in terms of numbers, qualitative research seeks to create an understanding. So that is a basic dichotomy that exists between explanation and understanding as the whole purpose of inquiry. Now, additionally, there is the second difference, in which Stake says that in quantitative research, the researcher is independent. Researcher is independent as in he does not have any personal role to play in that whole research process. He does not use his own reflexes, or he does not use his own interpretation of something. In quantitative research, what we do is we go to the field, we collect data, depending on what kind of instrument we're using. Most of the time we use some finite number of questions to elicit categorized or forced choice responses from the respondents. And apart, once we get answers to those questions, we are not interested in the participant anymore. So the researcher per se does not have any role to play, except for maybe going to the field and collecting using some instrument which he has designed in a very objective manner, and maybe again that analysis that he does is again very impersonal. Now that whole personal thing comes in case of qualitative research. Now in qualitative research, what happens is that the human becomes the instrument. Instead of depending on some fixed close-ended questions or some instrument that we have devised for the purpose, the researcher himself acts as an instrument. This term as of research, the human as instrument, was given by the very famous qualitative research scholars Lincoln and Gupa, when they said, and it's very interesting to know that in one of the papers they had said that owing to the sensitivity, the responsiveness, and the flexibility that comes with being a human, the human as an instrument is incomparable. It is incomparable in the sense that if we do say research in pure sciences, we subject our instrumentation to some kind of calibration. Again, if we do say maybe quantitative research, then also depending on what instrument we are using, if you're using some scale, if you're using some questionnaire, we subject that instrument to some kind of reliability and validity test. But human as an instrument is incomparable, they say, because in qualitative research what happens is like it is a more interpretivist, or it is a more humanistic kind of approach, in which the researcher goes to the field. The qualitative researcher, he does not have any fixed idea of a research design. He does not, before he goes to the field, he does not have a fixed idea, okay, this is the research design I'm going to apply. And he goes to the field, and he uses his own interpretation and his own reflexes and his own understanding of the social and historical experiences he uses, and he collects data from the field. And that data is something that the famous researcher Clifford Geertz calls them, he calls this kind of data that we collect from the field, which is so rich that he calls it thick descriptive. Now, thick descriptive is a term which is very, often used for qualitative data, in the sense that, as compared to the quantitative data that we collect in quantitative research, this is something which is very humanistic and very holistic and very rich. So this was a term used by Clifford Geertz. Now, if you have to quote the examples of different qualitative research types that we use in qualitative research, we all understand that case study, ethnography, and if you conduct some ethnographic research on the internet, then it is known as nethnography, then phenomenology, narrative research, grounded theory. These are all examples of qualitative research. Now, the core characteristic, like we have just discussed, the core characteristics of qualitative research is that you have a natural setting, you go to the field, and then the researcher himself is the key instrument. He uses his own understanding, and coupled with that is the the information that he gathers from the field. And then there is this non-reliance on questionnaires, and then multiple, because the interpretivist school of thought believes that there is not one reality, but all human beings are different and there are multiple realities. In that sense, if we are doing qualitative research, we believe in taking information from multiple sources. And then, the participant's meaning, what exactly the participant means. Now, inductive and deductive data, in the sense that, when we collect information, what the researcher does in qualitative research is that he collects information. He does not have a fixed research design, but he will talk to many people in the field. He will collect information. He will look at, what the participant says about something, or a social phenomenon, or maybe a social issue that a participant or the respondent for my study is going through. And then, accordingly, he designs some research. So that is why we call it emergent design, because, unless I go to the field, I will not be in a position to frame any kind of research design. And then reflexivity is again a very important factor in qualitative research, wherein I reflect on what my participants, as a researcher, I reflect on what my participants have told me, and accordingly, given the understanding that I have about a certain issue or phenomenon, I will try to frame a very holistic kind of finding towards it. So basically, you know, what happens in qualitative research is that, you know, the researcher poses certain generalizations or theories from past experience in literature, and then he looks for broad patterns or generalizations or certain themes and categories that emerge. He will, like, you know, basically, you know, observe people. Then he will ask them open-ended questions, and then, you know, analyze the data to come up with some patterns. And in that sense, what he does is that, you know, once he gets certain broad patterns or generalizations, that itself may lead to construction of some theory. As opposed to, you know, theory testing in quantitative research, qualitative research, you know, can lead to theory construction. And that is a very, you know, inductive, that we call inductive logic of research in qualitative research. Now, before we go to mixed methods research, I think it is very important for us to briefly go through the advantages and limitations of both quantitative and qualitative research. Now, advantages, as we all understand, quantitative research has certain advantages in terms of, you know, getting you know, data from large number of people. Suppose you do a survey or you conduct, you know, some experiment, we always seek numbers. We try to get as much information as possible, and once we get the data, we can subject the data to some, you know, efficient data analysis tools, and then maybe also, you know, demonstrate relationship among variables, and sometimes through conducting maybe some confirmatory test, also establish some causal effect relationship among different, you know, variables that are there. And basically, because, you know, there is this factor of numbers, because, you know, we collect information from a you know, big group of people. That is why the basic advantage, the most important advantage of quantitative research is the factor of generalizability. We can generalize it, you know, once we collect data from a small group of people, we can generalize it for the entire population. But in the flip side of quantitative research is that, you know, it is a very impersonal and dry method of collecting information, because, you know, when we go to the field, all of us must have experienced at one or the other point of time, where we go with a questionnaire. Most of the time, you know, in quantitative research, we have fixed, you know, alternative questions as opposed to open-ended questions in qualitative research. So that is why what happens is that, you know, I ask a few questions, and beyond that, the participant, you know, ceases to matter to me. I do not bother about what the, you know, experiences the respondents or my participants have about the real world. I'm only interested in certain questions that I put to my respondent. So that leads us to this whole limitation of, you know, limited understanding of the context of participants. I only have answers to the questions that I have asked. I do not know about the context of the participants. So, and basically, you know, most of the time it is very researcher driven. It is, you know, the participant or the respondent do not matter. Now, qualitative research, like we have already understood, you know, it gives the basic, one of the basic advantages of qualitative research is that, you know, it gives us detailed perspectives of a few people maybe, but we can hear the words of the participants. The participants can, you know, seamlessly, you know, tell us about their experiences, about the context in which a certain, you know, social situation or phenomenon occurs. And you know, the whole idea is that qualitative research is, you know, built from the views of both the of the participants and not the researcher, even though, you know, the researcher uses his or her interpretation of things, but then, you know, basically it is the participants or the, you know, people who are, you know, the whole, you know, people who are respondents of my study, they are the ones who get to tell me their stories. But again, the flip side is that there is limited generalizability, because I collect, you know, the biggest problem of qualitative research is that because I collect information or data from a small group of people, you know, I do not have, you know, the hard numbers. I have only what we call soft data, and that leads us to, you know, limited generalizability. I may not be in a position to generalize it. And as also one of the you know, accusations of, you know, doing qualitative research is that, you know, it is highly interpretative in nature, and, you know, subjectivity is something which is not very, you know, welcome when it comes to research. Now that brings us, you know, since we have already discussed about the basic what you call it, limitations and advantages of both quantitative and qualitative research, mixed methods research is an approach which has developed in recent times, and it belongs to the pragmatic, like we have already discussed, like in pragmatic research paradigm. We believe that, instead of depending on one particular method, we should be, allowed to combine, maybe a collection of different research methods, and that needs to be very pluralistic and maybe, very, what do you call it? It depends on the situation. According to the situation, we should be allowed to, conduct research to suit a particular, research problem. Now, mixed methods research is an emerging research approach in health and social sciences that involves both, statistical trends as well as stories to understand human and social problems. So basically, the whole idea is that, we in mixed methods research, what we do is we bring in the, quantitative research methods along with the qualitative research method. And this combination, it is assumed that, when an investigator brings in both statistical trends and stories, meaning he combines quantitative with qualitative research, that leads us to, a better understanding of a problem that neither, trends that come from quantitative research can explain, nor can, the only interpretivist kind of qualitative research can explain. So it is a good idea, it is believed, to combine both quantitative as well as qualitative research together. Now, one of the, key, proponents of the mixed method research is, like I already mentioned, Professor John Creswell from University of Nebraska at Lincoln. And he is like, he's written a lot of books on mixed methods research. And even as he explains what is mixed methods research, which is nothing but combination of quantitative and qualitative research, he also illustrates what mixed methods research is not. Now, we have had experiences wherein, we've seen researchers who say that they have mixed methods research, they have done some, adopted some maybe mixed methods research simply because they have done both, qualitative and quantitative, data. Just because your study brings to you qualitative and quantitative data, or, qualitative and quantitative data is available in your research, does not qualify, that particular research being a mixed methods research. That is not mixed methods research. Simply having quantitative and qualitative data available is not mixed methods research. And simply, again, another point that, Professor Creswell makes is that I cannot use the term mixed methods research without going through the rigorous methods that each of these, quantitative and qualitative, analysis or, research will entail. And also, collecting and reporting quantitative and qualitative data separately without combining them is not mixed methods research. Now, the whole idea is that I need to have, first of all, quantitative and qualitative analysis with the rigorous methods that each of these methods entail. And second, the third point is that at some point in time, I will have to, combine the two data sets together. Without combination, if I keep them separate, then it is not quantitative, it is not mixed methods research. And again, Professor Creswell says that simply using, multiple quantitative approaches, I have had experience where in people, they say, I've conducted an experiment and I've also conducted a survey, so I have done mixed methods research. That is not mixed methods research. If you combine one quantitative research method with another quantitative research method, that may be a multi-method, like Professor Creswell says, if you combine one quantitative with another quantitative method, that is not mixed methods research, but it is multi-method research. The same also applies when you are, opting for two, maybe, qualitative research approaches, like, if you combine an interview with also some kind of participant or non-participant observation, then that would be a multi-method research approach and not necessarily mixed methods research. Now, now what exactly he meant by, when he said that each of these, quantitative and qualitative research designs have to go through, something that he calls rigorous methods. He means that, if I go to the field, I have one instrument, and then maybe if I collect information and that information is both maybe, you know, I have some scale to measure, say, behavior, which is qualitative in nature, and I also have some, you know, hard facts as data. Now, if I have, you know, collected data only once, and if I have, you know, not gone through the rigorous methods or steps that each of these, you know, research designs, you know, ask for, then I'm not doing mixed methods research. Now, what are the rigorous methods Professor Creswell talks of? Now, in quantitative research, the, you know, the different steps that are there, right from, you know, framing a certain research design to, you know, deciding on the site, or, you know, seeking permission, then, you know, deciding on the sample, and then collecting the data, then instrumentation, you know, going through all the reliability and validity test, and then maybe, you know, also opting for some kind of descriptive and inferential statistics. If I go through all of these steps, and at the same time in qualitative research, you know, all the steps that you can see here, the qualitative design, which qualitative design I want to opt for, the site, where am I going to you know, conduct this research, then permissions, if I need permissions from the authorities or whoever, and then, you know, sampling, again, reciprocity as in, you know, the researcher will not only go to the field, observe, collect data, and come back. He will also, you know, give the participants the opportunity to, you know, give his or her point of view in a very free flow manner about something. Now, reciprocity, then again, protocol. When you are conducting qualitative research, there are certain protocols that need to be met. So each of these are considered to be very rigorous steps. If I go through, you know, if I'm, you know, doing mixed methods research, then for the quantitative research method also, I have to go through all of these, you know, rigorous steps. And also for the qualitative research, I have to go through all of these rigorous steps. Only if I have gone through all these rigorous steps in each of these quantitative and quantitative research strands, and then if I bring them together, then it will be known as mixed methods research. Now, like we have already discussed, you know, the collecting, what the four features, four key features of mixed methods research. Number one, collecting and analyzing quantitative and qualitative data, which means I'm collecting both open-ended and close-ended questions in response to what my research questions are. And then second point is that I'm using some rigorous quantitative and qualitative methods. Third is I'm combining or integrating the quantitative and qualitative data using a specific mixed method research design. Now, there are different types of mixed method research design that are available. And I'll be, you know, in the following slides, I'll be, you know, trying to briefly describe the most common ones. But basically, I will have to, using some kind of design that is available to me, I will have to combine the quantitative and qualitative strengths together. And finally, I will have to frame the mixed methods research, you know, within the purview of some broader framework, like an experiment, a theory, or maybe some kind of philosophy. Now, like we, you know, have already discussed, you know, the basic differences between research methods when it comes to quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods. In quantitative research, we have, you know, it is very predetermined. In qualitative, I already discussed that, you know, it is very emerging. The researcher does not have a fixed notion about a particular research design. He goes to the field and then decides which research, approach he should opt. Now, you know, mixed methods research is a combination of both predetermined and emerging methods. Now, second point is instrument-based questions. Now, in quantitative research, I need to have a questionnaire, or I need to have some kind of, you know, interview schedule if I go for a survey. But in qualitative research, it is open-ended. Now, because mixed method is a mix of both, I can have both open-ended and close-ended questions. Now, again, you know, because I think, you know, we are running out of time, you know, I have a few more slides left. So, you know, statistical analysis. Now, in quantitative research, because we are dealing with numbers, statistical analysis, statistical interpretation is a very, you know, important method that we use. In case of qualitative research, we may be using text, we may be using some kind of image analysis, and you know, naturally, because mixed method research is a mix of both, we have both statistical and text analysis in case of mixed methods research. Now, the different examples that we have already seen in quantitative research, you have the experimental designs or the non-experimental designs like the surveys. In qualitative research, you have research like narrative research, phenomenology, grounded theory, ethnography, case study. And in mixed methods research, this is what I'm going to discuss, right now. What are the different designs that are available in designs that are used in mixed methods research? But I'll not go into all these details because it will take a lot of time, and these are like very the theoretical things. But basically I will go by what Professor Creswell says are the basic mixed methods research designs. Now, according to Professor Creswell, you have known as convergent parallel design, you have explanatory sequential design, you have exploratory sequential design, and you have the transformative embedded or multi-phase design. Now, much as these designs seem to be complicated, but these are very easy to understand in the sense that I have already told you that mixed methods research is the bringing together of quantitative with qualitative approaches. Now, in quantitative research, you have some data which you collect with the help of questionnaires, or you have some content which you will analyze quantitatively, and on the other hand you have some qualitative strengths. Okay, now this is one of the most well-known approaches of mixed methods research, as said by Plano, Clark, and Creswell, in that it says that according to the if you can look at the term convergent parallel design. Now, when you do quantitative research and qualitative research parallelly, meaning at the same time, when we do quantitative and qualitative research parallelly at the same time, and then the two data sets that we have collected, from the quantitative as well as from the qualitative, if we bring it together and then come to some, if the findings converge, that is why you conduct the study parallelly together side by side, and then you converge the findings and then come up with some kind of interpretation. That is known as the convergent parallel design. Now, how does this help? This particular approach of mixed method research helps in order to corroborate findings. What information or findings I have come across from quantitative this thing, data analysis, whether it corroborates or whether it contradicts the information that comes from the qualitative strength. So that interpretation or that combination, this whole thing in conjunction with each other, that may lead us to having a better understanding of a social phenomenon. Now, explanatory sequential. Now, as the term suggests, sequential means one after the other. Now, quantitative strength, if you do quantitative research research and then follow it up with a qualitative research strength, then it is known as explanatory sequential design. Now, how does it help? Most of the times the quantitative research helps us in identifying certain, it helps us in generalizing it, in the sense that it helps us in identifying some typical cases and outliers, and according to, depending on what our research topic is about, we may be using that information that we gather from quantitative data and using some qualitative method to come up with some final analysis and interpretation. So this is known as explanatory sequential design. And the mirror opposite of that, explanatory sequential design is the exploratory sequential design. In exploratory sequential design, what happens is that qualitative research is done first, and then the data that we get from there, we follow it up with quantitative, we follow it up with some kind of quantitative information, and then and then we come to some final interpretation. Now, how does this help? Most of the time the qualitative strength helps as a pre-study to the actual quantitative study, and also helps maybe in the development of some research instrument like a questionnaire or an interview schedule. Now, in addition to that, there are other, more advanced mixed method research, things like the embedded mixed methods, when you have a collection of either, sequential or convergent parallel design, and you frame it within another, broad experiment, then it is known as embedded. When you put it as a part of another framework of research, like an experiment. For example, if I'm doing some kind of experiment, then maybe before doing the experiment or after doing the experiment, I may go for some kind of sequential, research, mixed methods research, or sometimes, I may be doing it, even as I'm doing the experiment. So that would be known as the embedded mixed methods research design. And transformative research design, like, it is when we use exploratory or, the convergent mixed methods research in order, within the framework of, some social issue or some social theory, in order to, understand or bring about some particular change. Like, I had quoted the work of Donna Martens, who had done a lot of, studies on how to bring about change, when it comes to things like, disability, using a mixed methods research design. Now, again, multi-methods research design or multi-phase research design is when we conduct, mixed methods research design not once, but in a sequence, in many times. This is done mostly in terms of, when we do projects, like, for situation analysis, I may be using some kind of mixed methods distinct approach, and then again during evaluation or during, say, implementation, I may be using some other method. So basically, when you do mixed methods research more than once, it is known as a multi-phase method. Now, coming to social media research. Now, coming to social media research, we all understand that there has been a growing emergence of interest in social media research, and owing to the variability and heterogeneity of social media use, different people use it for different purposes. Now, some people use it for identity creation, some people may be using it for some kind of gratification, some people may be using it for socialization, or maybe some people may also be engaging in some kind of civic and political participation. Now, depending on what kind of research problem you have, we have different kinds of quantitative. We all know that we have a lot of we have an array of quantitative and qualitative research approaches that are available to us, like especially with the coming of content mapping and user metrics or data analytic tools, we can have a lot of textual information in a short period of time. We can be using some kind of web scraping or web harvesting or web crawler devices and software, and we can get a lot of information in a short period of time. But the problem here is that the quantitative research that we do again has there is less emphasis on interpretation, and they do not explain how the users operate in culturally grounded context. The data that I collect in social media research, that may not be generalizable for the entire population. So on the other hand, we also have different approaches like netography, or maybe text mining or data mining, which may lead us to some qualitative measures. But qualitative approaches in researching social media. But the problem is, qualitative methods are again considered to be impressionistic and subjective, and they do not they are not believed to be grounds for generalizing across cases. And then, in addition, like I just mentioned, there are automated and computational approaches to social media analysis, like sentiment analysis. So these are done with the help of software, but this again, is believed to be, superficial and may incur in errors. So that brings us to the idea of, or the whole idea of using mixed methods research in social media research. Now, since we are well conversant with what is meant by convergent parallel design, wherein I said that the quantitative and qualitative strands are done together. The strands are then again brought in together or merged together. And there are different examples. Of late, I had gone through a paper by Graphigna and Riva, and they had done a meta-analysis of different kinds of research that is done on social media in the last past decade. And they have found that there are many people who have been doing mixed methods research, but since the term has not found currency, that is why people call it triangulation. The people call it multi-method. So these are examples that I have collected from Graphigna and Riva's paper, wherein they say if you are doing convergent parallel design, maybe you can have you can collect information. The example that they have given here is that if you look at example number 2, educational use and privacy issues on Facebook, they what this study did was they integrated web surveys and interviews using some methodological triangulation, in the sense that they also conducted, along with, surveys that they conducted, they followed it up with interviews of those people regarding the particular issue at hand. Now again, when it comes to issues like, say, self-presentation on social media sites, you may be conducting interviews, but if you follow it up, or if if at the same time you are also conducting some focus group interviews of, say, maybe those very people, then you are doing mixed methods research, and this will be known as convergent parallel design. Then there are other examples that I have placed here, like the explanatory sequential design. Like I said, when you do the quantitative portion first and then follow it up with a qualitative analysis, it helps to understand the quantitative findings better. So in that sense, the quantitative data, suppose I collect from Facebook about Facebook privacy, and many people may not be very open or vocal about what they are facing or the experiences they have on Facebook when it comes to issues of privacy. But if I follow it up with maybe some focus group interview, that may help in my understanding of the research topic. So these are all examples. For example, this is a very famous study which was done by these two people. The person has a longish name, and Jens. So these people, what they had done was they had done a study of user created videos about Islam on YouTube. So what they had done was they had done an analysis of the videos on YouTube page and YouTube pages, and they had quantified those information or variables, like in terms of video characteristics, producer demographics, balance, and then they followed it up with interviews of some of the people who had actually created those videos, in order to find out what led them to create content on YouTube, on a topic like Islam. Now these are like all examples, but basically this whole idea of mixed methods research is something which is slowly gaining currency in the social media research scenario. Not too many people, like Graphigna and Riva, they say, if people do not clearly understand the difference between maybe triangulation and mixed methods research, they sometimes call it, they have been using, her meta-analysis reveals that they have been using mixed methods research, but since the term has not found currency among most of our scholars, so that is why they use it, use some different terminology to explain this particular thing. Now Riva and Graphigna, they have come up with another whole concept, which they are through a series of publications, they are trying to propagate a whole new approach to looking at research or mixed methods research when it comes to social media research. They call it integrated mixed methods research. Now in this thing, they say, if I integrate qualitative analytical tools like interpretative analysis, discourse analysis, or maybe even thematic analysis, and if I use some automatized quantitative analysis, for example, there are different softwares that are available. For example, NCapture is some, it is a tool that is available with the software called NVivo, which engages like, so if I combine qualitative and quantitative, that also automatized analysis, like something that we call data analytics or social media analytics or big data, if I can combine the two, then it may lead us to a total what do you call it, total different kind of approach towards looking at social media research. So basically I'll just take 2 more minutes, sir, to wind up, because I understand there is a paucity of time. Now qualitative, the basic notion of mixed methods research in social media research, how it helps. My idea or my feeling is that there is this if we use mixed methods research in social media research, that can enhance, I feel it can enhance both the quality as well as the explanatory power of data. Now quantitative data will give us the explanation, we can understand quantitative this thing, the explanatory power will come from the quantitative thing, and maybe if we use some qualitative tool, that will help us to deepen or broader understand, it will create a broader and deeper understanding of maybe a social phenomenon. And then like we have already discussed, we can use mixed methods research in social media research by combining both, quantitative and qualitative research in order to create maybe a better understanding of networks, network practices, what are the conditions and the consequences and interpretations. Now, because only quantitative data or only qualitative data may not suffice. So what we need here is a more pragmatic view of looking at social media research. And in this sense, I feel that, the whole idea of measurement, that of validation, confirmation of results, so all of these things. Okay, so when we bring in quantitative and qualitative, research strengths together and use it for social media analysis, that may help us to, go for better corroboration, and maybe, if the data sets, contradict each other, then maybe, it will overall help us in having a better breadth and depth of understanding when it comes to issues like, networks, network practices, and, basic, the gratification that social media provides. So, that is all I had to say today, sir. I had to go a little fast because of, it's already 2:20. I think it's getting late.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Sunil sir, you there?
Yes, I am here.
Thank you, Madam Dr. Rossi. So
Yes, sir.
now I request our advisor of the webinar, Professor
sir.
of Eminence, Dr. Sunil Kant Behra, is very much with us. So now I request Dr. Behra to put some light on the
Yeah.
discussion of Dr. Rossi.
You see, before commenting on your lecture, I have a question, Aisha.
Yes, sir.
If I would have taught you this much in one class, what would have been your status then? And when I
That
was
I understand, sir.
research methodology,
Yes, sir.
I was having always blank faces, not of yours, of course, but many of the faces were blank, as if they don't understand anything.
Yes,
Now,
sir.
it is a heavily loaded lecture. I have learned also some new things. You began with the traditional things of positivism and post-positivism, interpretivism, then your transformative or critical, and also you have used the pragmatist. When you talked about, you have also talked about, used Comte, used Dewey, used Piaget, and also,
Yes, sir.
I don't know, Heckmer, all those things you have, that was very interesting. What is
Yes, sir.
more important is you have very rightly tried to differentiate between the quantitative, qualitative, and what we call the mixed method approach.
Yes, sir.
Now, again, lot of research scholars, they think that if they do a survey and do some interviews, they say that it is mixed method approach, which you
Yes,
have
sir.
very rightly pointed that it is not mixed method research or approach.
Yes,
That
sir.
is a very misconception almost all the scholars and students do have. I am
Yes, sir.
happy that you have tried to dispel that myth. And it's not. And when you talked about the various methods, what mixed method research is not, that's
Yes, sir.
very important. Simply
Yes, sir.
using a name without rigorous methods, you have talked about also the rigorous methods. Again,
Yes, sir.
when we talked about rigorous methods, you have got the differences between quantitative and qualitative. And if my participants are observing, there is an element of reciprocity in qualitative, and there is an element of assignment of participants. Protocols are there, instruments are here. So how do they differ? Instruments and protocols. What is the difference? I'm sure it is within a very short time you have explained, but nevertheless, this is this must facilitate the. They must search for these things when they read about these mixed method research processes. And if you have also very rightly talked about the 4 key features of the mixed method research, and the design, particularly the convergent parallel design, the explanatory sequential design, the exploratory sequential design, the embedded mixed method research or transformative mixed method research, and the multi-method research design. The multi-method, it's not mixed method. Once if you do one qualitative and one quantitative, that is not mixed method. You have also talked about the triangulation, and more importantly toward the end, how it can be applicable to the social media sector, which is a emerging sector of research today. You have brought in those things, and integrated mixed method approach, the new mixed method approach, which honestly speaking, I was also not aware of, which was brought in by Grafingda and Riva in 2014, the 4 steps, qualitative analytic parameters and the quantitative atomized analysis. I will have to again read those things, but that was something new for me. I will also, so I'm happy. And you have also talked about the mixed method research design in social media research. All the 6 steps that you have talked about, that is a very wholesome and holistic presentation, Ayesha. That was the truth, era of truth. I was always telling you, you are the best student. But today, in the post-truth era, I will say that you are a best teacher because I have learned many things from you. So keep up with this tradition of making me happy by being the best teacher, by being a committed and dedicated teacher. Thank you, Ayesha, for the
Thank you
wonderful
so much. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Now, madam, we will go for the Q&A. I request our host to share the questions raised by our participants.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Critical realism of Tashakuri and Tedley. Okay. Yeah. Tashakuri and Tedley. See, actually, I'm not, to be very honest, I'm not, I have not done too much research on Tashakuri and Tedley, but what I, do assume is that, they went for a different, kind of approach in addition to, what was already there in the, positivist or, what you call it, transformative or interpretivist kind of approach. And they, I think I'm not too aware about Tashakuri and Tedley and their, notion of critical realism, but I know that they have been like, proposing for a more pluralistic or, what do you call it, a multi-method kind of approach when it comes to research, wherein they feel that, the positivist notion of only, gathering numbers, or the interpretivist version of only, getting, say, what do you call it, getting, say, qualitative information may not, suffice. We do not actually understand, the truth only in terms of numbers or maybe in terms of, subjective stories. So what was actually required, the kind of, paper that I had written that, Tashakuri and Tedley have written was like, they wanted an integration of different methods when it comes to, research. And then, they said that, we should be free to, as and when the situation demands, we should be in a position to use a multitude of research approaches that are available to us. Hello?
Yes.
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 So question number 2 is here.
Question number, okay. Question one, explain grounded theory may be applied in content analysis of films. Now, content analysis of films. Now, it all depends. Content analysis, if you maybe are, if you're doing some kind of, semiotic analysis. If you're doing some kind of semiotic analysis, then, if you're looking at maybe, say, in the context of films, if you're looking at the films of a particular, filmmaker, over, if you're doing maybe, say, a longitudinal research of a particular filmmaker's films, and then, you're analyzing them without having any fixed, notion about what you may find, then maybe after, analyzing, say, 5, 6, or 10 films, you may be in a position to identify certain trends or maybe certain patterns that the filmmaker has in all of his, films. and that may lead you to creation of some kind of what do you call it, you may identify them and then go back and forth again, analyze more content, and then maybe using some information that you collect through analysis of his films, maybe you can also come to some theory creation, because I feel is what grounded theory is all about. Like you come from the field and then observe something. So when it comes to analyzing films, maybe you will say look at the content and then look for trends and patterns, and then maybe put them together, and then if you can put them under a certain trend, or say if you can identify certain variables which are maybe recurring, then maybe you can theorize, or maybe talk, come up to some conclusion about that particular filmmaker's films. Yes. Triangulation, yeah, triangulation. Somebody was, I had noticed the difference between triangulation and mixed methods. So triangulation, it is a, method that is used by maybe, social surveyors, wherein we try to locate something, by knowing two known points. Triangulation, the whole idea of triangulation is that, there are two known points in space, and we are trying to know the third point by, the third unknown point using some already, known, spaces. So that is the idea of triangulation. Now, triangulation and mixed methods research, these are different in the sense that, triangulation sometimes may be mixed method, but sometimes, but triangulation need not necessarily always be a mixed method approach, because suppose you are doing some kind of, survey which is quantitative, and then again you are following it up by using some kind of, you're again conducting some kind of experiment, both of which are, say, quantitative, tools or quantitative approaches. If you're using both quantitative approaches, then you are of course doing triangulation, because you want to get data from two sets so as to compare and contrast. But that is not mixed methods research. But if you are doing one quantitative, and then you're also combining a data set that you get from doing qualitative research, then it is mixed methods research. So the whole idea is that in mixed methods research, one strand has to be quantitative and at least one strand has to be quantitative. Qualitative and quantitative, if both the strands are combined together, we have already discussed about the different terms and conditions that need to be met in order for a research approach to be known as mixed methods. So that is the basic difference, I feel.
So
Hello,
thank you, madam. So
thank you, sir.
Heartfelt thanks and my gratitude to you that you join with us and you spare your valuable time from your busy schedule. I know the day one, the moment I talked to you regarding joining with us our webinar, by the time you said your inabilities of engagement of somewhere in your academic year.
Yes, sir. Actually, I have an exam.
We are very thankful you.
Thank you, sir.
After observation made by our advisor, Dr. Sunil Kant Behera, at least I can say you had a very splendid session, very useful and very informative to all of our participants. So this is my observation about your presentation today. So many thanks to you. I also extend my thanks and gratitude to our advisor, Professor of Eminence, Dr. Sunil Kant Behera, and to all of our participants. Here we will wrap up this today's session, and tomorrow again on 4th June, as I told you, informed you in the beginning, tomorrow is the last day of our webinar series, and tomorrow we will meet with our new resource person with new issue, and I have no words so how to thank all of our participants. Really, their patience really pushed me to keep up this program more and more. So at least I extend my sincere thanks to all of our participants, to our hosts, my colleagues, my students, those who have joined with us and make this webinar series successful. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you,
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.